Oh, are
Go
you
ahead.
gonna do
No,
it?
no, go ahead.
Please.
The stage is all yours. I'm not Tongan. My God.
Also, the Philippines. I was together. Well, let me sing my song.
Okay. Why don't you sing your song?
Balihay may call you any night, any day. I for the longest time thought that the Philippines was in the southern hemisphere.
Oh yes.
Because I at one point, I think it was like 2 years ago, where I was like, well, it was last year.
It was last year because
I was like, well, it's Christmas
under the equator.
I was like, it's like summer. It's not winter in the Philippines because you guys are in the southern hemisphere. And RJ goes, no, we're not. And I was like, what? He's like, no, we're not. And so then I had to look at a full global map and be like, oh, it's much higher than I thought it was.
Yeah. I was watching a clip of an Irish comedian who somebody called her British, and she was like, no, I'm not from the Republic of Ireland, very much not. And the person was like, I thought that you guys were all part of the same country. And she was like, no. And she goes, when did that happen? And the person like pulls out her phone to look it up. And she was like, because apparently an Irish person was not a good source of information about whether or not Ireland is part of the UK.
Imagine Adam like having to go to the library, look up an old globe and like spinning
just
it
to see
try
if RJ remembers correctly which hemisphere his home country is. Yeah.
The only thing I'll say about the British thing is like, isn't all of it called?
You need to slow down and think about what you're going to say, sir.
Aren't the archipelago of islands called the British Isles? That's like the encompassing geographical region.
But that's not what the term
I just want to be
British
clear. No, I understand.
Yes, that's not how it was being used.
No, I would never call an Irish person British.
Yes.
I would call them English.
Oh, great.
Okay. All right. Off to a great start.
Yeah.
Molly, do we have anything in the mailbox?
We sure as heck do. Let me read you a few lovely things. Bryce wrote in about Pirates of Penzance and said that
we have had so many feedback on Pirates of Penzance.
People love the Pirates episode. And Bryce said that they've been kind of going back in the episodes and said that our Pirates of Penzance podcast is the funniest one I've heard so far. Your orphan discussion had my stomach hurting with how hard I laughed. So thank you, Bryce. That's lovely. Rita wrote in 5 days ago.
Trouble. Teacher.
Said,
we're gonna get sued.
I opened my podcast feed to see. I have to choose between your discussion of this delightful classic. This was when Gypsy was released, and another podcast discussing the latest Trump indictment. As entertaining as you are, I'm afraid you can't compete this time.
We really can't.
Rita was letting us know we got bumped. We got bumped by the Trump news. Unfortunately, I will also say this was not in an email, but it was via phone call that I had recently with Rita. That she was talking about Betty Friedan, and she has also not read
friend of the pod, Betty Friedan.
Yeah.
And
she loves Showgays for sure.
Yeah, I think she'd be into it.
Huge supporter of gay people in general.
Oh, really? Is that I didn't know that.
She's the one who coined the Lavender Menace.
Okay, well, that wasn't part of this. We need to do a follow-up podcast where we just do research on Betty Friedan.
We're going to write the Betty Friedan musical is what we're going to do.
Oh my God. Can you imagine a musical just skewering homophobes? That would be truly the peak of the art form. Okay. No, what Rita was telling me is that that the Feminine Mystique came out when she was a young woman, and that for her generation, it felt very sort of like not useful because it was so focused on the experience of housewives. And she was like, we were interested in Gloria Steinem and like getting ourselves into the workforce. And that was where our focus was. And that it just to her, like, not that it wasn't useful for maybe people who were a little bit older than she was, but like that it's interesting to think of it as a book that came out and was really revolutionary. But for like the people who are really like coming into their own political identity, it already felt out of date by the time that it was out because, Rita famously was in the third class of women that was ever admitted to Duke Law. And
Jesus
so,
Christ.
Wow.
Yeah. So she was really focused on like, I'm out here and I'm going to have a career, honey, and you're all going to have to deal with it. And so that was her focus. And she was like, I don't care about the plight of the housewife. That's not what I'm out here for. So I thought that was really interesting to get that perspective. Other readers who have experience with the Feminine Mystique, write in. Tell us about it.
Well, it just goes to show, I mean, there's not one piece of like analysis. There's not one thing that like defines an entire political thought or idea.
Unless
like,
it's our analyses of these movies.
Yes.
Right, obviously.
Yeah.
We are the completionist perspective on every political topic, but other than our podcast, everything else has elements that are missing, I think is what we're trying to say.
That's nailed it.
And then Robert, who did include his pronouns, thank you, Robert, wrote in to suggest that we do the musical South Pacific. So thank you, Robert, for writing in. I know you knew it. You had a sense. Robert wrote, well, it's not a flawless film. It had its moments, and I do enjoy watching it from time to time, problematic elements aside. I definitely enjoy this film more than Gigi.
Problematic elements? Where?
Yeah, I don't know. We're going to have to really do some digging, some excavating as we discuss to try to figure out what it could be that Robert is referring to, because
deep metaphors that we are not comprehending.
Yeah. And we have to comprehend them because we are completionist, as I said, on all political topics. So that's where we're at. Thank you, Robert, for the suggestion that we had on the calendar 6 months ago.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for writing in. If you please continue to do so.
Please continue to write us. We are coming up on, the season's about to end. The showies are
coming. We have to do
coming in mid-November.
We have to do some planning. Maybe we do maybe we give like one award, like People's Choice or something like that.
Oh, a People's Choice Award. Ooh, no one's ever had something like that before. Yeah.
Open up the just write in if there's musicals we need to do that are easily accessible online. That I don't have to find an old VHS from a hermit down at the shop around the corner.
That's been true for the last couple. Yeah.
Molly, this week you have the task of summarizing South Pacific. I think this should be pretty simple. It's not too wild, to be honest. You think so?
I don't know. As I was writing it out, I don't know. Maybe I included a level of detail I didn't need to, but some stuff felt like it needed to be in there. So we'll see. We'll see if this is a minute.
The year is 1943.
Eisenhower's in the White House.
Eisenhower's not in the White House famously during World War II. No, he was a general, in fact.
Oops. I'm just a girl. I don't know things.
I'm just
this is pre-Betty. This is pre-Betty for Dan.
Pre-Betty, so I can't know about history that happened before feminism. That's how it works.
Right. I agree. You have the task of summarizing South Pacific in a minute or less, and your time starts now.
During World War II, somewhere in the South Pacific, Lieutenant Cable arrives on an island military base with intentions to recruit the expat French plantation owner, Emile de Bec, onto a dangerous mission to spy on incoming ships from behind enemy lines. Military officers convince nurse Nellie Forbush, who has started a relationship with Emile, to suss out his trustworthiness. In the process, Nellie realizes how little she had known about Emile, including the full story of a murder he committed in France, but he tells her everything and they get back together. The officers propose the mission to Emile, who turns them down so that he can live his happy life with Nellie. Discouraged, Cable decides to sneak away to the forbidden Bali High, where he falls for a loved Tonkinese woman named Liat, but balks at the idea of marrying her. Nellie learns that Emile is a widower, having previously married a Polynesian woman, and that he has 2 mixed-race children, which causes Nellie to break off their relationship again. With Emile and Cable both dejected, they decide to go ahead with the mission. They successfully turn around the conflict, but Cable dies. When Nellie learns Emile is in danger, she realizes she loves him enough to disregard her prejudices. Emile returns to safety to find Nellie caring for his children, and we end on their embrace.
5 extra seconds. You're great. You're so close. Very good. I will start, and I will say that I was in this musical Once Upon a Midnight Dreary. I think it was I was going into 8th grade is when I was in this. Obviously I was one of the sailors. Okay, slick.
There's nothing like it. There's
nothing like a dame
really
lady.
Just nothing like a dame.
So yeah, it was fun. It was like the summer. Our school corporation did like a summer musical every year, and so anybody in the school corporation in the district could like audition for it.
Fun.
And obviously it's a very guy heavy show, if you can believe it. And so I was, still a soprano, but they made me a sailor. Okay. So that's South Pacific. I also owned the cast album from the film album, and I have it memorized, as RJ can attest, because I was singing every song.
It's a real treat.
Of course it is. And then I'll tell you my mom's history, even because she does talk about this a lot, that this is one of the records that my grandma had. And so when they would clean the house, this one is one she played a lot.
Mm-hmm. This is house cleaning music for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to wash this rug from all of its stains. I'm going to wash the dishes.
Molly, what's your history with South Pacific?
It's definitely one that I watched as a kid, and I knew songs from that just would come up in musical theater workshop-y things like Nothing Like a Dame, Wash the Man Right Out of My Hair, and Some Enchanted Evening. I feel like are the big three that come up most often. And then I saw a production of it at the Guthrie. I want to say when I was like in college or something like that. So I've seen it on stage and I've seen the movie before, but I wouldn't say I had like a deep relationship. I could tell you the general plot and some of the songs, but it wasn't like a core musical in my repertoire.
RJ?
This was my first time watching this movie.
Oh.
I knew of South Pacific just like you, just like through osmosis of being in musical theater. I do remember like there was a revival and like I want to say around high school, college, and
with Kelly O'Hara.
Okay. And the woman who played Bloody Mary was like the first Native Hawaiian to be nominated for a Tony, I believe. So I remember seeing that. So I saw her perform Bali High in like on TV, and I was like, oh. And then I remembered in a voice in college, I had his song that he sings to Liat, the ballad.
Is
it Younger Than Springtime?
Yeah, I think that's the title of the song. Yeah.
So, yeah, what a song.
What a song. I had that song in my book. And then I want to say this was like, I remember in Orlando, in the theater that I did a lot of theater with, the director was like, I really want to do this, but there's like no Asian people in Orlando theater. And
so he had done it. That was his first show with CFC Arts.
Was it South Pacific or was it?
It was South
Pirates.
Pacific.
Oh, it was South Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
and everyone was like, "Wow, he did such a great job with it," and that's why they like made him the theater director. Yeah,
it was like a small black box theater. So I had like for some reason was like, oh, it would be a fun show for me to do because like there's so few shows that have like Asian characters in it. But when I watched it, I was like, okay,
there's barely any Asian characters in this, and it takes place in the South Pacific.
Yeah. Also, there aren't any men who are Asian in the musical.
No,
that's true.
So
I mean, like
that's true.
They're around in the background.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think like great drag role to play Bloody Mary, but
for
like
sure.
Yeah, take one of the
but I wouldn't want to take
roles
one of the three. Yeah.
From a woman.
Cabaret setting could be fun.
Well, speaking of cabaret settings in this musical, RJ.
Huh?
RJ. RJ.
Oh, yes. We did a cabaret called Ingenues Anonymous in Florida, in Orlando, where it was like all of the different ingenues in musical theater come to like a help meeting, an AA type meeting to talk about their love, whatever. And Nelly is the like leader. And so she sings like, I'm going to watch that man. And then in the middle of her song gets a call from Emil saying that he wants to marry her. And then she like sings and goes into I'm in love. And everyone's like, well, what gives? And it was a laugh riot.
A laugh riot.
Yeah.
South Pacific, the musical, is based on Tales of the South Pacific, a 1947 Pulitzer Prize winning collection of sequentially related short stories by James A. Michener about the Pacific campaign in World War II. James Michener actually was he was born he's birthright Quaker, which is a term I learned today. And so if you apparently are birthright Quaker, if there is a draft, you are allowed to you are able to say no because they're pacifists by religion.
And that just means that you were born to Quakers. Is that what the birthright part means?
I would assume so. Yeah. Not just you were like converted yesterday, but that you actually like are from a Quaker household.
Is that why Lutellan in Philadelphia, or like he has a girl in Philadelphia?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So anyway, so he was Quaker, but he was like 1942. We had. Oh, are you gonna tell us?
I just was going to confirm birthright Quaker is an individual who has parents who are Quakers. Yeah.
Great. It's 1942. We're in World War II since the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941. And so he still ends up joining the army anyway. And they actually, I think because he was like a writer, they have him like compile in 1944. I think they have him go to the South Pacific so that he can compile like stories of what has happened, like kind of like the history of the campaign for like documentary purposes, basically.
Slay.
And he has a near death experience. Like he almost gets shot down out of the sky or whatever. And so because of it, he kind of writes this collection of stories that like are like based in fact, but are fictional to some extent. And then this is what becomes Tales of the South Pacific. It has 19 chapters, and the way that the stories are told, the themes in the chapters are the same. So like chapter 1 and chapter 19 are reflective. Chapter 2 and chapter 18 are about a battle. Chapter 3 and chapter 17 are about like preparation for a battle. Like, so they kind of like are in tandem in that way.
Very like Cloud Atlas.
Yes. And then chapter 10, because it's right in the middle, it doesn't have a pair, but it's the main story. That's the love story that the Lieutenant Cable narrative is derived from in the musical.
Oh, I was going to say it's when Jamie and Kathy
finally get married and they have the only duet. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So that's all I really want to say about the book. I mean, it's impressive that it won a Pulitzer. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was it like well received? I'm assuming because it won a Pulitzer. It was like, okay.
Yeah. I don't have like stats on sales or anything like that.
But it was like the popular book of the time. So it was like.
It was a popular book at the time.
Yeah.
I think this was before we had backlash to things that were critically appreciated. So probably if it got a Pulitzer, people basically liked it.
People were oh yeah.
We didn't have commentary over on X at the time in which people were, picking apart popular things. Yeah.
I was just thinking like when we talked about King and I, that book, like it seems like this is now the second like Rodgers and Hammerstein that we're talking about, where it's like there was a popular book and they want to try and make a show out of it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, because the other two, Oklahoma and Carousel, were based on plays.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, these are based on books, and then Sound of Music is also based on a memoir as well. So they turned to books later than just adapting plays and musicals. But
yeah. I don't know though if it was like one of them knew about it and had the idea versus like someone approached them, because I feel like you hear about that a lot too with musicals, is that someone will like pitch them, here's this thing you could make a musical out of, and I don't know which one it was. Yeah.
So South Pacific, I can tell you, it was brought to them as an idea for something to do. So the musical, the book, the Tales of the South Pacific, the book had come out in 1947. The musical debuts on Broadway in 1949. So this is like
that's quick,
very quick.
Yeah.
Were these songs like were these already
all new?
All new? Wow.
Yeah.
Not like a Cole Porter, let's pull it out of the
So in the Rodgers and Hammerstein chronology, this is post Oklahoma was their first, Carousel was their second. They hit both of those out of the water. They were like two of the greatest musicals ever.
Yeah, we love Carousel, no critiques.
Oh, yeah.
No critiques whatsoever.
Top, basically.
What I mean is like they were critical successes at the time. And then Allegro happened, which is like kind of like experimental one. And it was a huge flop. So then this is right after that where they were like, oh, we got to do something. So
this is their Lion King. What was the one Disney like revived in the 90s? That like turned it around for them?
Mermaid.
Mermaid.
Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. Okay. So
I'm so sorry for triggering you guys by bringing up Disney.
Mermaid.
So music is by Richard Rodgers. Lyrics are by Oscar Hammerstein II. And the book, which usually is also just by Oscar Hammerstein II, is also credited to a Joshua Logan. So Hammerstein had never been in the military in any way whatsoever. So he actually found it very difficult to write a lot of the dialogue because he didn't understand the like how people talk in the military, like stuff like that, like the nuances of that. And Joshua Logan, who is the director of the original production, he had been in the military, so he helped him out a lot. And then asked for credit. So they gave him partial credit for the book, but they did not pay him or something like that. Something about how they like sent an ultimatum to his lawyer to be like, sign this in 2 hours or you don't get to direct the show even. Like, we'll give you credit if you don't sign it, but like then you won't get to direct it, which is wild. So anyway, there was like a big, and when he wrote his like memoirs in like 1976, he like basically was like, I could have made so much more money, but they didn't allow me to have proper credit, blah, 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 which Richard Rodgers refuted at some point. But
did you also notice in the credits of the show or the movie that it was like showing you like, and then here's the people who wrote it, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden there was a like a screen that was like lyrics by Hammerstein, like taking up the whole screen, and none of the rest of the credits were like that. And then it went back to the like regular scale text.
I did not notice that.
It felt incredibly petty, and I'm wondering if it's connected to this whole thing.
Yeah.
Maybe. So anyway, the inception of the musical, they were looking for a new piece. This book was brought to them by Leland Hayward, who also ends up bringing the Sound of Music memoir to them as well to adapt. So they agreed to do it. Honestly, the weird thing is like about the story is like normally I feel like in these it's like, oh, if this hadn't happened, then this wouldn't have happened. But this is so straightforward. Like they basically everything just like works out pretty easily with South Pacific. They were worried that the story would be a little too close to Madama Butterfly.
Which while we were watching, Adam was like, "Do you know how this movie ends?" And I was like, "I don't think so, because I think in my mind I'm thinking of Madama Butterfly's plot." And he was like, he just gave an all-knowing like, huh. So
that's why, because obviously the Cable Liat plot line is very reminiscent of that. That's why they end up focusing the main plot A on Nellie and Emil.
Do you want to give a 2-minute line or 2 lines?
2 minutes.
No, but Molly would love to because we saw it together.
We did see it together for my birthday one year. Madama Butterfly is about a woman in Japan who has a husband who's an American GI who's not there, and she's had a child with him. Most of the opera is about her being in her house, kind of anxiously getting ready for him to return. She's so excited for him to come back, and everyone around her is like, maybe you should lower your expectations, but she refuses to listen to them. And when he finally does arrive, it turns out that he has an American wife, and that he did not consider himself to be sort of committed to Butterfly in the way that she thought he was. I believe she then reveals the child to him and then commits suicide.
Right? It ends with a suicide, right?
I'm 99% sure. Hold on. Let me just double check that. And then we can cut this out if it's wrong.
You guys watched it at the Chicago Opera?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
I really want to see a show there.
Agreeing to give up her child if Pinkerton comes himself to see her, she then prays to statues of her ancestral god, says goodbye to her son, and blindfolds him. She places a small American flag in his hands and goes behind a screen, killing herself with her father's seppuku knife. Pinkerton rushes in, but he is too late and Butterfly dies.
Yes.
Cool.
Thank you so much for that detailed summary of the end. Yes. But she is a very pathetic and tragic character, is sort of the overall.
Like the true sense of the word, not the pejorative, but the like true sense of the word pathetic.
I would say in both senses, actually, of the word.
Okay.
I'm not trying to like judge her as if she were a person. I'm saying like, I think that it's an Italian opera. Obviously, it's not written from the perspective of an actual Japanese person.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think
Huge
that she is written to be this very passive and sad and, feminine in the sense of not being able to take any control of her life kind of character. And so it fits into the theme of musicals and operas that treat Asia in a very specific way of having these very passive women to be consumed by white men.
Yeah.
Woof.
Fun. So this musical.
Hey, we chose to put this right after Do Re Mi. We knew what we were doing, y'all.
This musical does not do a ballet, which is like a break from the Rodgers and Hammerstein tradition because they wanted to ground it in a more realistic setting. Again, this is the musical, not the film. We will talk about the realism of the film in a little bit. Mary Martin ends up being cast in her first role with Rodgers and Hammerstein. She had been almost cast as Lori in Oklahoma, but she didn't get it. So they came back to her. And then the guy who played Emile DeBeck, his name, he was like Italian opera singer. Ezio Pinza. He was a signed former Met Opera star. It's probably Ezio is how you'd probably actually pronounce it. He was like much older, obviously, like narratively, he's much older than Mary Martin, which was not very common for the male lead of a show on Broadway to be so much older. So that was kind of like a break with Broadway tradition.
Well, they certainly talk about older men and young women a lot in this musical. So
they do. It's true. He was not used to doing 8 shows a week because famously operas don't do that. It's not how operas work. So Mary Martin later would say like she remembers that he would like start the week super strong, give 150%, and then like by the fifth performance would like barely be able to sing in the last two. He would have to call in his like his understudy to like do the last couple of performances for the week.
Sometimes you got to know when to market, you know.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you just got to give enough to make sure you don't, you know, like lose your steam for the
We're taking an official stance to give 75% on this podcast.
Yes.
We're going back to that article that caused a scandal a few months ago.
Yeah. Maybe not like say it so just, you know, dismissively and like, oh yeah, like, you know, we don't take it like seriously. I'm like, no, not that.
I'm not going to go back to actually relitigating that article. Yes.
Mary Martin influenced several of her own songs. She came up with the idea for a scene in which she would shampoo her hair on stage, which led to I'm going to wash that man right out of my hair, which became an iconic part of this musical.
It became so iconic that I learned in the article that I just read the introduction of because I ran out of time that her short haircut became a fashion sensation and shampoo companies began marketing a once a day use for their products, relying on Martin's example to sell it.
Whoa,
that's
she
wild.
like caused a shampoo craze.
She was the Rachel of the time.
She was the Rachel of the time, yeah.
But just about shampoo. And then when he introduced I'm in Love with a Wonderful Guy, Richard Rodgers remembered that he gave her the song. She came over to the apartment. He played the song for her. She sang it on the piano bench at the very end. She sings, I'm in love, I'm in love, I'm in. She sings it over and over and over. And she sang the final 26 words as intended with a single breath and fell off of the piano bench. Rodgers gazed down at her and said, that's exactly what I want. Never do it differently. We must feel you couldn't squeeze out another sound, end quote. So men shouldn't give 150%, but women should. To be clear, that's the stance we're taking.
Yes.
On stage, she genuinely is shampooing her hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that was like a big thing that she actually washed it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Did you do that in your production, Adam?
That's a great question. I think it was mimed because we didn't have like actual water on stage. Because in order to shampoo it, you have to be able to like rinse it with something.
Getting water on stage is famously difficult. It's a lot more complicated than you think it's going to be.
Yeah. And then for the other roles, Juanita Hill, I'll call out because she ends up playing Bloody Mary in the movie that we just saw as well. So she's the only cast member from the original production that does end up in the movie. She is African American. She, I believe, is biracial. She's half black and half white. And Betta St. John, who under the name Betty Striegler had replaced Louise in Carousel, took the role of Liat. Basically what I'm saying is I don't think there were any Asian people in the show. Not terribly surprising, to be honest, but that's what was going on there. Okay, so at the Tonys, it won 10 Tonys.
Wow, one?
Yes, it won 10 Tonys. It won, which does include Best Musical and all 4 acting awards that year, which is the only musical in history to ever win all 4 acting awards.
I was going to say, didn't Hamilton do that? But Hamilton didn't get 3. All 4. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because Cynthia Erivo won for Color Purple.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So huge.
Big comeback.
And a huge success to the point that when they tried it out, they were actually like nervous that it was going to be. There was so much buzz in the tryout that it was so good that when they took it to Broadway, it was going to like not meet expectations because there had been so much buzz around it. And then everybody loved it.
It was great. Can I add to that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Article I read said before 20th Century Fox bought the movie rights in 1956, South Pacific had already earned profits of more than $5 billion. The film version.
Insane.
The film version received 3 Academy Award nominations, and the soundtrack album was in the United States top 10 for 2 years with 54 weeks in the #1 spot.
Oh my God.
It's wild. The like half of the songs in this musical became like standards.
Yeah. I mean, I guess
wild.
Hamilton is probably like the closest thing that you could compare it to now, right? Like a commercially successful Broadway musical.
It's hard because we have yes, I guess in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
Because I would say like Wicked is also like huge, obviously. But the tone of musicals now is because those are like purposefully big budget, like massive things.
Well, I think
this really wasn't at the time.
I think also this was when musicals were less niche. So everybody like being in the top charts would be remarkable now. So Hamilton, I feel like part of what was big about it was that it broke out of the musical
The
theater
niche.
audience. Like
Mhm.
Wicked is huge with musical people.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it didn't break out of that realm really. I mean, I'm sure people go to see it and stuff, but you know what I mean? Whereas Hamilton did, because it reached people who have an interest in like hip hop and the other genres it was pulling from. So I think Hamilton, I'm guessing if you compared 21st century musicals based on like chart position, I would guess Hamilton blows everything else away. So it is comparable, but it's also not, because this was back in the time when like everyone would listen to music.
Everyone is listening to musicals. Yeah.
I will just say in with all the other Tonys that it won, Juanita Hill was the one who won for best featured actress in a musical. She was the first ever Black winner of the Tony Award.
Amazing.
And then the other awards that won were best producer, which I don't even think that's a category anymore, because isn't that just best musical and then give it to the producers?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And then best director, best libretto, best original score, and best scenic design. So swept. Okay, let's talk about the movie. It is directed by Joshua Logan. Okay, same director from the Broadway production and co-writer of the book. Screenplay is by Paul Osborne. It is produced by Buddy Adler. It stars Rosanna Brazzi, Mitzi Gaynor, John Kerr, France Nguyen.
When?
Well, we had the same conversation. When was it? What movie was that? It was King and I. Because she was born in Marseille. So I don't know how she would pronounce her last name. So this is the great question that we could ask her, because she is still alive. She's 83.
Oh. Should we send
She sent an email.
Can we ask her?
Email? Can I tell you about this woman's life that I looked up earlier? This is wild. Okay, so France.
It's the same actress from King and I, or no?
No, she was in the running for King and I for top 10, but she did not. She lost it to
Did she? Rita
Moreno. However, this is her first movie. South Pacific is her first movie. She didn't speak like any English because she was born in Marseille. She's French. But she was able to talk to the guy who played Emile, because even though he's Italian, he did also speak French, so they could converse on set. But she does a bunch of different work. She does a bunch of different films in the 50s and 60s, and then slowly tapers off. She does some television work in the 70s. And then in the 80s, okay, listen to this. Wait, where did it go? In 1986, Nguyen earned a master's degree in clinical psychology and began a second career as a counselor for abused women, children, and women in prison. She received a Woman of the Year award in 1989 for her psychology work. Isn't that crazy?
That's amazing.
It's cool when actors go on to do other things. So the guy who plays Lieutenant Cable, whose name is Ray Walston, he in the 70s was like, I'm over Hollywood, and then just became a lawyer, and then was a lawyer until 2000 when he retired.
Wow.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
John.
He also went to Harvard, so I think he was just like bright in general.
Is it John Kerr? It's John Kerr. If you look at the cast on the left.
I bet you that he's smart, but
John
also he's so attractive that I'm sure that helped him be.
I'm sure that helped in court. Like, oh, well.
Very attractive.
I know. Yeah.
So Ray Walston, actually played Luther Billis, and Juanita Hall, as we said, played Bloody Mary. Cinematography is by Leon Shamroy. It is edited by Robert L. Simpson. The production company was South Pacific Enterprises, a production company made by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein and Joshua Logan for this movie. And then it never did another production. I don't know. Listen, I know that sometimes like
Showgays Productions.
Well, no, I know that the military will, if you are showing the military in a positive light, they will like give, like, this is why Marvel makes a lot of like pro-military energy stuff, because they are allowed to like use certain things or like get funds. Anyway, so I don't know if that has a reason to do with it, but they do at the very beginning. They have like a title card that's like, we thank the U.S. military for allowing us to make this, or something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say overall, it's not super nationalistic, but it's there's no criticism of the military or of the war or anything like that. So
no, and I mean,
can imagine. Yeah.
I mean, this is like in the great canon of American wars. This is like the last one that Americans are supposed to always feel good that we like participated in.
The
like
great canon of war.
I mean, like
the plot.
No, I'm just making fun of like canon is usually referring to like literature. And we're talking about like actual history. But yes, I think that it's pretty uncontroversial that of all the wars America fought, World War II was probably the most justified to fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we're doing this while Oppenheimer is in the theaters, though. And there's a lot of
and I'm saying that America made no mistakes at all when it came to
and I just want to make sure we got that on record.
And I just want to make sure, especially after we talked about bad stuff Japan did last episode, what we're saying is America made no mistake.
Right.
I'm totally, this is actually too awful that I just want to make sure that we're really
Yeah. Interesting.
Hey guys, real Molly here. Like having to say,
step outside.
Step outside the bit for just a second and say I'm against nuclear war. Okay.
Wow, strong take here.
Strong take. We should not have bombed Japan with that bomb. I don't think.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, this is also very interesting because, like, even when this movie comes out, obviously the musical comes out in 1949, so we're 4 years out from World War II ending. So everyone is pure, like, we are so justified. Even in 1958, there's no discussion about whether we did the right thing or not with World War II. And I do feel like you get a bit of the energy of, like, when they go to Bali High in the movie, and we'll get to it when we talk about it, but when we go to Bali High in the movie and it's like, we're welcoming the white men. Thank God they're here.
Oh my God.
Like, it has that energy. And I was like, it's just like, that's why. I mean, like, truly, all of these, like, American men that went overseas to go fight in this war and had no context for, like, what was, I mean, they were just, like, doing A, what the government told them to do because most of them were drafted, or B, like, their national pride to, like, participate in this thing because we were bombed in Pearl Harbor, blah, blah, blah. And then have no, I mean, like, it's just the way that the Pacific, like, war specifically, what we were doing over there, like, even integrated itself into, like, American culture by, like, everybody getting, like, fascinated with, like, Nehru jackets and, like, people brought tiki bars, like, over, like, it just, like, it came back because of all these guys who went over and were like, this aspect of this one thing was crazy and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, interesting. I'm sure someone's written a book about it.
I'm sure there is a huge, like, tiki bar, like, history, like, it's stemming from, like, this war.
Yeah, that would be that seems like it's going to be a cool, like, nonfiction book in, like, talking about the history of tiki bars in America, but, like, through the lens of, like, and then what does that reflect geopolitically?
Right.
That'd be really cool. Yeah.
So it's distributed by 20th Century Fox. It was released on March 19th, 1958. I do want to say this was a roadshow film. We have discussed this topic before, but
of course,
a roadshow film meant that it opened in, like, they took it on the road to different major cities, and then once a certain number of cities had seen it, then it went wide as a wide release. So
honestly, bring it back. Doesn't that feel
cool
like
idea? It's like
an
an event.
A post-COVID, make it an event kind of a thing that we should. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Wicked movie is coming out, and
we can bring it back.
Girl, we got some buzz around it now.
Girl, so, you want to talk buzz?
Oh, you want to talk about interest and what's going on the set of a musical? Let me tell you about Wicked.
The running time
I watched a video about it this morning, and somebody was like, Ariana Grande had an affair with the only straight man on set of Wicked.
Truly. Yeah. She found the one. And the one he is the role that is canonically almost always played by gay men. It's very frustrating. Anyway,
we're subverting expectations about how you cast things, expectations about what it means to be married to someone. You know what I mean? We're subverting it. That's camp.
It's camp.
Sontag would approve of Ariana Grande's affair, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Hi, Molly here. Just stepping outside of the bit. We obviously do not condone.
I love that the character of one of us stepping outside is always going to be me.
Yeah.
Hey guys. Hey everyone. Just me here.
So the running time of the film is 157 minutes in the theatrical version, but in the roadshow version, it was 172 minutes.
Wow.
Wait, what was the difference between the two?
50 something and
15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
Is that a song? Is that extended sequences in a number?
Well, they definitely don't do all of I'm gonna wash that man right out of my hair. They cut it after, like, the first verse. So I think they probably do the rest of that. And I think there's, like, another song that felt shortened as well. But it's probably just mostly dialogue, honestly. Budget is 5.61 mil. And the box office is 17.5 mil. But then it says US and Canada rentals. And what does that mean?
So you used to do this thing where you had to go to a store and then you would rent a VHS tape and you would take it home and you would watch it for like a week and then you would have to bring it back to the store.
No, that can't be right.
But how long do you keep it for?
What's the point of that?
Can't I just buy it on Apple TV?
I can't just own a digital copy that'll maybe one day I won't be able to own it anymore because the rights will be passed off to another company. So everything I actually owned is intangible.
Yes. The concept of ownership is slowly eroding in our culture.
It's true.
Well,
things about the production. It was big. It was good. I don't really have anything else to say. Here's the thing. The director was like, okay, the iconic thing about this, and when I say iconic, I just mean the thing you remember most about this movie musical are the Technicolor sequences, the filters, the color filters on the lens.
Said that?
No. I'm telling you.
Oh, okay.
He was like, we were trying to shoot. Obviously, there's a lot of day for night shoot, which is fine, whatever. Yeah. But he was like, it's very hard when you're doing almost all outdoor shooting to have it be like match the lighting exactly from like day to day. So, because they shot in like Hawaii, mostly they shot in Hawaii, and then they did like some exterior shots and like B-roll in like Malaysia, I believe. And so he was like, my thought was is we could like amplify the like the gorgeousness of like the Polynesian setting by like having these like slight color filters on, but then like when it came back, they realized it was like oversaturated, but they didn't have time to like reshoot it. So he was like very disappointed in the color sequences. However, later in his life, his son would say that the first time they ever watched it on TV, he was like, oh, it actually looks really good on the small screen as opposed to like on a big screen. But obviously this is like not this screen. This would my 65-inch TV was probably still too big for what he was referring to. But
so, okay. I feel like we have to pause here and talk about the version that we both watched on YouTube because I couldn't find it anywhere else.
No, it's not available. No,
in fact, I got to the first sequence that was significantly color graded and did another search just to make sure because I was like, I'll pay somebody $4 for this movie. I want it to be
Molly. I told Adam, I was like, oh, they put a color filter over it so that it wouldn't get copyright struck by YouTube, and then they would have to delete the video.
That was what I said when I got to Valley High.
Yep, that's the first one when it happens. Yeah.
Right. So do we think that the person who uploaded it to YouTube like leaned in heavier, or is it just the severity of what they did and that it's not a very high quality upload?
I think that's it. I think it's like uploading a low quality video, exporting it into high.
It's pulled. You can tell it's pulled from a VHS.
Yeah.
So it's already like ripped from a VHS and then like low quality uploaded to YouTube at like probably 720 at the highest.
Numbers.
Thank you.
But just
so I do think
all
it's
of that.
part of that because the first time I ever saw this movie,
we could not even see. It was just an orange screen.
There was a part in which it was so yellow that I was like, "Oh, you can't see."
Yeah,
and I don't think that is how bad it is in the like of the version I remember seeing. But I do remember like the thing I remember from when I first saw this movie in like I don't know 4th grade, 3rd grade was I was like, "Oh my god, why is it color?" Like it's so bizarre.
It's so weird in Valley High because the other songs that are color graded are like, it's like yellow for happy songs and like blue for sad songs. So you at least have a sense of like, oh, okay, I get where they're going with tonally. Valley High is like Barbie pink. And I guess that it's just meant to be like otherworldly, dreamy. But like, I don't know why that shade of pink is what they chose for what they were trying to convey. And that's why I thought like, maybe somebody just did this to get around copyright, but I guess not.
I mean, it goes back to the whole thing of like, I think the idea is like all of these guys who had never seen anywhere in the world like this, like the whole thing is like Valley High it's so exotic. We hate the word exotic now, but like, it's so cool because it's not normal. Well, except it is normal for the people who live there.
Yeah. It's forbidden is a big part of it.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's portrayed as like a like an Eden type of thing.
Yes.
Right.
And it's very associated with femininity because the thing about Valley High is that all of the women got sent over to Valley High when the Americans landed there to set up a military operation in order to protect the women. And so it's, you know, how mysticism and women get all tied up together.
Fun.
Yeah.
The only other thing I want to say is that the opening scenes in this movie are switched from the original production. So in the original show and in the theatrical version that was released in the UK for some reason, I don't understand this, but the show is supposed to start off with the kids singing Dites-moi, Emile Debec's two kids. And then it has their like soliloquies to each other and then Some Enchanted Evening. Like that whole sequence is the start of the show. And then you go back to the camp.
Okay.
Whereas this movie does it backwards, where you start with they added a scene of Lieutenant Cable like flying in on the plane, but the movie basically starts with like the men on the beach with There's Nothing Like a Date.
I could kind of tell, and I think it was partially that I remembered something about the opening of it from having seen it on stage, but also just that airplane scene felt so like we threw this into the movie version to like just give you some exposition and really get you into it. We're worried you weren't going to understand what's happening. So it starts with a scene of like, here we are flying. That over there is an island that the Japanese control. Let me explain the layout of this place that we're going to. You know, it's very exposition heavy. So you can kind of feel, okay, this got added to be like very clear with the audience about what's going on.
Yeah. And then Juanita Hall plays Bloody Mary, and obviously sang her role on stage, but she was dubbed for the movie. So they dubbed her with Muriel Smith, who played Bloody Mary in the London stage production.
The songs or everything, even her dialogue?
The songs specifically.
The thing that I saw about this, I don't remember if this was in the actual article I read or on Wikipedia, but it was something like that the person producing it thought that her vibrato was like out of control or something like that. And I don't know, it had something to do with the deterioration of her voice where I was like, the character is not meant to have like this amazing control. Like she's meant to be an older woman. Do you know what I mean? Like it seemed weird to me to be that critical of her voice, and who knows? I mean, probably she sounded amazing still at the time, but I feel like you could have somebody in this role who doesn't have the greatest singing voice because it would fit with what the character is meant to be. So it's sort of odd. It's
so surprising for Rodgers and Hammerstein to write a older woman character who takes care of a younger woman. It's
right. That's not really their
new
thing. Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it. We can go to talk about the movie now.
To start with RJ. No, I want to start with RJ because we, as I referenced, intentionally put this right after Do Re Mi because we thought it would be a good little balancing act. And RJ said that it was his first time watching this. So I want to start with RJ's reaction overall to the movie.
I will say I was drawing more comparisons between South Pacific and King and I in terms of like, just like, you know, what's it like to tell a story in the East, and like how effective it is. And,
I don't think that Do Re Mi and South Pacific have anything to do with each other plot wise.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I think what I was thinking of comparing is in terms of like the perspective of the people actually making it in terms of portraying a place.
Oh, I mean, like it was kind of hard to watch. I'm not gonna lie. I was on my phone a lot.
But but in what sense? Like, because it's a very slow film.
I
is that part of it too?
That was part of it, but I think like I'm trying to remember. There was one. I'm trying to remember if like there was a clear scene that I remember taking note of. Like, okay, this I'm truly not paying attention. I mean, I guess it was more the war stuff, like all the military stuff that I was just like, I truly could care less. I could care less. Did I say it correctly?
No, you did not say.
I couldn't care less.
Yeah. I just went off
about it last week on the Did You Read group chat pod. I think it's just kind of because it's running off on just one idea that like it's something like I don't know, like because I feel like my experience on this type of like story comes from like more Miss Saigon like story, because I like Miss Saigon, but in terms of like the music is beautiful, the performances are so good and powerful. Is the story like
I mean,
should we be telling the story? I don't know.
Equally problematic, must I guess.
Yeah, I will like. I think like the idea of just the idea of the Pacific campaign from the perspective of like where they like took camp in and then like kind of like occupied. That was the word I was looking for. Like it's so tough because even for like the Philippines, like today, like the GI kind of occupation specifically from this war still still has like influence over the Philippines today. Like we still have Air Force, like American bases. We we have our public transportation is a Jeep, like we eat Spam.
Yeah.
Like so much of our culture still, like modern culture today takes influence from the GI occupation that it's
how do people talk about that time in history?
I feel like I was kind of seeing more of like how it manifested to most of the media that I grew up, or like pop culture wise, was already so Western already. Like we were quote unquote American. I think like that. And like that was kind of the fascination of that like we were trying to adapt like American and more Western like consumption of media or like our tastes. And so I think it was more.
It's very similar to what happened with like Korea, specifically following like the Korean War too.
Yeah. So I do feel like there's something to think about how like we highly regard it in terms of like, like media and culture, but it comes from a place of like the history was that it was an occupation,
Yeah.
So I would say it's very conflicted because I do sense now like Filipinos and Filipino Americans now are in a place of like, should we be trying to reclaim now that we know that like, or we have like a better sense of like, was that actually right?
Yeah. And you emigrated when you were 10, right?
I was 13.
13.
But
it would be interesting if you had been in school in the Philippines for a little bit longer, because I would love to know how it gets taught in like a history class. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I from like getting all the way to 7th grade, the only thing I could remember was more of like a broad what happened in World War II. And then like we got our quote unquote independence after World War II, like what we talked about in Torrey. So like, I think it's still very much, it's that idea of like now that like my generation now is who is becoming like, like scholars and people that are like critically thinking about the history, that we're really thinking about like, should we have been like, let's be more critical of like why we celebrated so much American stuff from like, like from those decades,
Right.
Yeah.
Because this musical it's so much sees, and it's not really in like a specific place. They never name specific islands, anything like that. Although they say Tonkinese as to describe
but it's not like they like how it's written. Like even when I was reaching, they were spelling it like Tonkinese, but it's not Tonga,
right? Tonga.
So it is kind of like still a made up amalgamation.
It's kind of an amalgamation made up place basically. But it definitely portrays the islands that they're in as a place that like kind of doesn't have a culture. Like every discussion is about how would people back in America think about the stuff that we're doing here and whatever. Like there's no sense. Cable has this whole conflict about like, I couldn't marry Liat. Like that seems very, I don't know if it says this explicitly, but it seems very grounded in like, what would people back home think if I brought her back home?
If I brought her back, yeah. And
there's no discussion of like, what do the people here think about you marrying
someone?
Well, everything it's like there aren't rules here is kind of the idea, but we have to go back to the place with rules. Yeah.
Because I was telling Adam, like, even the whole storyline of Emil, like, even though he's very successful, it's like, but it's rooted from like colonialism that he was able to like, build plantations in these islands.
The like first line out of Nellie's mouth is like, so you own all of this? And you're like, whoa, all right. So we got to really think about it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the most, okay. So what I find most fascinating about South Pacific is like, it was like the thing that excited, maybe not excited, but the thing that I think Rodgers and Hammerstein specifically were trying to do was like really confront like the fact that they were like, we can talk about race. Like we are able to do this. And I think for the time that they are writing, because like the song, You've Got to Be Carefully
Taught
was like a huge contentious like piece of art. And it was like, there were questions.
Fox News would have been all over
it.
They would literally call this song woke today.
Yeah.
It's what we live in the worst goddamn timeline.
They would not play this song in schools today in Florida. Hell no.
No.
Oh, for sure. I can give you some history with that too.
Oh yes, please.
This is from, so the article I keep referring to that I read like 3 pages of, I'm so sorry, everybody, is You've Got to Be Carefully Taught the Politics of Race in Rodgers and Hammerstein's South Pacific by Andrea Most, which was published in Theater Journal in 2000. What was interesting is that right off the bat, Most says they were counseled many times in previews to cut the song for it being too controversial, too preachy, or simply inappropriate in a musical, but they really fought to keep it in, and obviously they did. It caused a commotion to the extent that when it had a performance in Georgia, a bill got proposed to ban entertainment with an underlying philosophy inspired by Moscow. So,
oh my God.
Yes, I know. Time is a flat circle.
Well, also, like, I love the idea that, like, you know, Russia's really leading the charge on like egalitarianism.
Yeah.
Like no racial problems whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, but it's so bizarre to think about, like, there's like a big thing with right wingers online about like cultural Marxism, which is just this like fully made up idea. Just words. They're just words. And
word soup.
Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like honestly, they're giving Karl Marx like too much credit for how
he really did not do that much, guys. He wrote a book.
He was like, I am just talking about like,
I'm talking about theory.
People who plant like.
Karl Marx was like way ahead of us on trans rights, apparently, according to right wingers online. So
he was living in the year 3000, maybe.
So Most talks about the fact that is like kind of raised this question of like, this is 1958, this is pre-civil rights movement. Like, why did Rodgers and Hammerstein write this thing about race? It was not really in the conversation. And I think one element, and I'm guessing this is later in the article, is probably that people had this experience of going to these other countries, and I'm sure, and GIs fell in love with women there, and that happened, right?
It's like, it's coming, basically.
Yeah. But also Most asserts this thing that there was like this effort in liberal circles to try to make being pro civil rights and being very anti-racist as a way to be anti-communist, with the argument of like, if we treat some of our citizens as second class, those are people who are going to be susceptible to communist ideas. And so like, we should make our society more egalitarian because that will help us remain anti-communist. And that was what Rodgers and Hammerstein were doing. And that specifically from a Jewish perspective, that they were trying to make being anti-racist, also anti-communist, because there was a lot of anxiety in the American Jewish community about being equated with being Jewish and being communist, apparently. So that's really interesting. And I wish I could give you more information, but again, I ran out of time. But I think that's a fascinating read in terms of what were the nuances of racial politics at the time, and also to think about this as something that chose to bring up race kind of unprompted, I think is really interesting. Yeah. And I remember having a discussion about this song in a musical theater class that I took, because in some ways I think that the song continues to hold relevance. And in some ways I feel that it doesn't. And I feel like the real problem for me is the word careful. Because carefully taught, because I feel, especially in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, we've become so much more aware of how much of that being taught is not intentional, right? That prejudice happens through osmosis and assumptions and everything around you telling you something without somebody having to tell you to be prejudiced against somebody. And so it feels very like this song to me now feels very the way that we thought about racism in the like mid 2000s, when I remember people talking about it as a thing of like, that's a thing that mostly doesn't exist anymore. There are some weird people in a couple places where their parents are really racist, and those racist parents taught them to have prejudiced ideas. And that's still a thing that exists in a couple spots that we should really stop. But like, that's kind of it, because it's the carefully taught. And then also there's a line that's like, to be taught to hate the people your relatives hate. So it's very like focused on like the family is the one who influences that way of thinking, which really kind of lets the rest of society off the hook for sure. But I also think it's interesting, and I'm stalling for time because I had a second half to this thought and I have forgotten it as I'm talking. So maybe I'll just let somebody else say something, and then I'll pop back in when I remember the second half of what I wanted to say. Would either of you like to pick up the conversation thread?
It makes me think of the idea that like, well, I don't see race. So it's like that, you know, it meaning like I never taught you to be racist because it's not like it shouldn't matter. Like it doesn't matter.
Yes.
You know, you don't see race. So it is that like early 2000s-ish like idea of like, well, racism doesn't exist because it's like, it's not like my parents told me that like, you know, hate a brown person or whatever. But it's because of the absence of like thinking about it deeper, of like thinking about like, well, why do people, you know, like that is it becomes an excuse, you know?
I think, thank you for picking up the conversation. And I now remember the second half, which is, I think what it is speaking against though, is the idea that it is natural to be prejudiced. That is the thing that he starts the song off with, is like, it's not something that you are born with. It is something that you are taught at a young age. And so I think that is probably the part that was revolutionary at the time. Cause I do feel like there was a real like strong justification of American racism that had to do with like, it's natural for like the races to be separate, and like that was how things like should be, or like that's what God intends or something like that. And so I think that the idea of having prejudiced ideas is not actually natural in any way, I'm guessing is the part that was really revolutionary at the time.
Yeah.
Let's listen to a little bit of You've Got to Be Carefully Taught.
You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made, and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's
What I think is so fascinating, to finish my thought from earlier, is how I think this movie and this show in general, that was not a drag at you, by the way. I like where that conversation went. I think it's fascinating how this piece like very clearly is trying to grab, like both of these plots are about racism. Like,
yeah, that's true.
The show is about World War II in the way that like, in the way that it's not. I mean, it's set in World War II.
Set in World War II, but it's not really about the war. Yeah.
Right. It's about racism. And I think like it is for 1949 when this musical came out, like it's great that that's, you know, we got to that point, but it does feel, it's the thing of like, when you look back, when we do revivals, we had this conversation with Carousel where it's like, should we be doing revivals? Should we never, like, what we have in order to engage with this art, you have to, in good faith, like explain, you can't leave it uncontextual. You have to talk about it in context of being like, okay, so this is 1949. We've come a long way since then. There's still going to be, then it's like the show still has stuff that's like, and it's not even like, obviously Nelly specifically like espouses beliefs that are like, oh girl, but that's like specifically that's the point of it.
Yeah,
like she's like stupid because she's an idiot, but they knew that writing it. But then there's like the whole, like the Bally High stuff, the like Bloody Mary, all of Bloody Mary's character, like,
well, that idea we talked about in King and I were like, you know, casting an authentically Thai production of the show doesn't actually solve the prejudices of the show.
Right.
You know?
Yes. Yeah. We could dive into some specific couples, but I would love to talk about Nelly too. If we just were like cutting right to the heart of the.
Let's go to Nelly. And let me tell you Nelly's story in the original book.
Yes.
So Emil has 8 daughters.
Wow.
In the original book. Very, very virile, apparently. In the book, Nelly is fine with people who are white, or as described, yellow.
Ooh.
However, 6 of his children were from a darker skinned Polynesian woman, and she refers to them as the N-word.
Oh no.
And this is her problem. Her problem is not the 2 children that are like very Asian centric, like mixed French and Polynesian, but like the darker skinned ones are her problem.
So it's like colorism more so than racism.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so they obviously simplify it obviously they're not going to cast 8 children. That's insane that there are 8 children. It's wild. And I think it's probably a little bit neater and tidier to just be like, her problem is just like he slept with an Asian woman or he fathered Asian children. But yeah, that is textually in the book what her issue is. So just to be clear.
It's very interesting in the musical. I assume this is the same line in the musical as the movie. But I'll just speak to the movie. So in the movie, she meets his children. She freaks out. She leaves. He comes back to talk to her later. And he's like, so can you like clarify for me what the issue is? Is your issue my children?
Yeah.
And she says no.
To be clear, her issue is not that he murdered someone. I just want to
make
the murder clear, because that was like, I just met you, but I think that's fine.
Weird that they like include it as a plot point because I'm like,
we have to go back. We have to go back to the murder because I want to talk about the murder very badly, but not right now.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Put a pin on that. Put a
pin
on the murder.
We're going to pin the murder and we're going to come back to the murder. He says, your issue the children. She says, no, your children are really cute because we all know racism can't stand up against cuteness. And then and then he's like, so your problem was my wife. And she was like, yes. And she kind of says like, I know that that's kind of messed up, but I can't get past it. So she claims at least that she does not have an issue with the fact that he has mixed children. It's the fact that he had a wife who was Polynesian and that really bothers her and she can't get past it. So that I think is really interesting, especially because like the children are still around and the wife is dead.
Yes.
So
yes.
I don't know, like that's what she says, but it surprises me that would really be the thing that she has an issue with. And I don't know. So it's like,
and I don't know if that's like on purpose, like it is purposely confusing in that way. Or like backward, quote unquote, backwards to be like, she's upset about something that is done. And there's no even
I have always interpreted it as like, she is her
mother.
No, well, she talks about her mother's like prejudice in the film. She uses the word prejudice, but I've always interpreted it as her issue is like the fact that the idea that Emil could love a non-white person.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's right. And I guess in a way, the line about, well, I don't have an issue with your children has to be there so that you feel like by the end when they get together that she like sees the children as people and cares about them and that you can like believe that and not be concerned for them that she's going to become a stepmother to them.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So, okay, here's what I want to praise first. We've talked before about the fact that I think there needs to be more media that has characters who you can empathize with, who express racist ideas, because we need to have white people seeing people with prejudices that they are able to imagine themselves in and see them challenge their own prejudiced ideas. Because if every character that you have that has prejudices is just a caricature villain, it's very easy for people who have power to just say like, well, I'm not like that person. No need to self-reflect. I'm certainly not Kirsten Dunst in Hidden Figures, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So I like that. I like that Nellie is like a beloved character in the musical theater canon. People want to play that character. I've never heard somebody be like, I'd love to play Nellie, but like, oh, the racism part would be hard to do. Like,
right. Because she changes.
She learns her lesson. She's admirable for other reasons. And maybe part of what makes it work.
I feel like she's like 19.
Pin that.
2 pins on the board.
I don't think Mitzi Gaynor was 19, but I think,
so I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought thinking about how young the characters are.
So many pins.
And I think part of what makes it work too is that she, even as she is dealing with it, acknowledges like, I don't have a good reason for the way that I feel. And she kind of like is negatively reflective about it immediately, even as she's struggling with her own prejudices.
And I think that is like an admirable part to watch, that it's like, there's a person who's like, I know this is wrong of me, but like, I can't help it. And I don't know why. Like, I'm confused as to why.
Yeah. And I think
that's like her whole character is, she sings a song called Cockeyed Optimist, which like in the show, it's, I think, the first song in the actual musical, like the first full song, is her being like, I'm so naive and young, girl. Like, I don't know anything. So I do think that is like part of how she gets away, or the character gets away with being like, I'm so confused because she's never had her beliefs challenged like ever in her life.
Yeah. And I think we can all probably empathize, probably not with like the specific situation of being like, I'm freaked out that my partner dated someone of a different race, but like having that feeling of like, I don't know, I'm having a negative reaction to this thing. I don't know why. And I'm going to need to examine that, is probably something a lot of people can relate to.
Yes.
So I think that's all good to have portrayed and have it be in a story that we continue to tell. What I think doesn't work is like, why does she learn to not be prejudiced? She sees that Emil is in danger. And I will say, on a romance level, I'm not like a huge Emil Nelly person, whatever. Some Enchanted Evening absolutely slaps. It's amazing. But like, I'm not in love with this couple generally. But it worked for me in the movie when she's like looking at the other island and she's just like, just live, please live. And there's like the utility of that moment of her just like begging for that to happen with no power over it. I think it's really beautiful.
I had the exact same reaction, Molly. I literally at the end started laughing uncontrollably, and Adam was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "It worked. I don't know what to tell you.
Girl, it worked.
They got me, gal. I was rooting for them at the end."
But I also feel like basically the narrative is she has this prejudice. She can't get over it. She realizes she loves him so much, she's going to get over it. It's like the plot. And that almost portrays it as like, it's a flaw of his that she gets over. I know that that's not their intention, because I know that they had the song and they really wanted to keep it in. I understand that their intention was in fact to preach tolerance, right? But
tolerance.
The actual
all you need to do is tolerate people of color.
We know they're annoying, but you got to tolerate them. That's basically what that means, right?
Yeah.
This is Molly stepping out of the pot. I'm obviously joking.
Hi, Molly here. Just wanted to clarify. Step out of the bit.
So we're goofing in this bit. Okay, back to the plot. So it's really just the level at which she loves him that makes her choose to not be prejudiced anymore, is kind of the text of the musical, I feel. And I think a better text would be to have her have an interaction with a person of color that causes her to realize how she has dehumanized them previously, right? I mean, maybe that's not the best way to do it, but I don't really get what they're trying to tell me about what it means to unlearn your prejudices through the fact that it's just that she loves him so much she chooses to get over it. I don't know what they're trying to
there was a
advocate
little
for.
Sense that I felt in that moment when Bloody Mary and Liat comes, and she kind of like sees that Liat is also like heartbroken, and she kind of sees like, oh, we're all the same. We're all just trying to love. That to me was like, okay, but I kind of saw that as like, that was their attempt to kind of showing her how to get over it.
No, that's a good interpretation. And I think maybe that is supposed to be in there. And I was kind of missing the significance of, I guess, because I think maybe the reason that got undercut for me is that before that is when she's talking to the island, right? And she says like, the only thing that matters is us being together. I was taking that as like, that's the moment that she says, I'm not going to be prejudiced anymore.
Yeah.
But I think that does make sense for her seeing Liat's pain to be her ability to then empathize with people more on a human level. Yeah.
It did make me laugh when the two of them walk to her and I think they say something like, are they going to be okay or whatever? Or have you heard anything from them?
Yeah.
And she goes, who are you? It was like, this could take time. She had no idea who these.
This is a movie that does not pass the Bechdel test in any sense of the words.
No, I mean, part of me appreciated that they acknowledged like, hey, these two characters haven't had an interaction.
I've never interacted.
To ask who you are. But like, maybe you could have had them interact and that could be a thing that pays off in this scene rather than literally being like, you're who? You were going to marry him? Oh, dang. Oh, I've got bad news for you. Like, what a wild way for that to unfold.
It's like, and you are like, just out of nowhere. So funny.
RJ, did you see Lieutenant Cable dying coming?
I did not.
Did you, Molly? You knew.
I know
because you had seen it before. Yeah.
I truly, I didn't. I really didn't know where it was going. Because even when they were like going on their mission, I reacted to Adam. I was like, oh, that's right. This is a plot. I was like, oh, I completely forgot that this was
right.
I love RJ that earlier you said that you like tuned out for all the military stuff, because I'm sure that whole plane sequence was them being like, and then this is the banger in the middle, is that you get this whole like thing.
I know.
With, behind two lines, and RJ was like, this is the dull part.
Just tell me when you.
It was close enough to a helicopter for me to really appreciate it, but it wasn't quite a helicopter sequence, so it had some flaws.
It's more of like the audible. I need to hear the propeller. To get a
Someone needs to do a song.
I do a great impression of a helicopter.
It's the opening sequence of Music Man, but instead they're in helicopters.
Wow.
Why so has like, no one has done a tap number with a helicopter blade, like, keeping the tempo. And I think that's a shame.
There was no like a Gene Kelly movie where he was about to skydive, but first he had to do like a tap routine inside the helicopter.
In 20 years, when we're just doing AI movies with amalgamations of actors, I'm sure that we're going to get that one.
Well, we'll do like a Donald Trump biopic, a presidential musical, and one song will take place on Marine One, and so that's how you'll get your helicopter moment.
Wow, sure. What a horrifying reality you're proposing.
Did you tell Adam is just like deep in Pod Save America right now in the Trump indictment?
That's where Rita went to the last time we did this episode. Okay, wait, what are we talking about? We were talking about
we weren't talking about anything.
No, it was the war part. And did you see his death coming? And
oh, yes. Did you see Cable's death coming? I think actually, though, before I started watching it, I remembered that he does not end up with Liat. Like, they don't successfully overcome it, but I couldn't remember why that happens. And it's interesting the fact that they just sort of avoid the question in a way by having him die.
Yeah.
Let me say that. Yeah, go on.
There's something about.
I will say, I didn't think.
Really quickly
before you speak.
I'm
the one who always does it, so it's only fair. It's only
we fight
fair.
back. I do think that I didn't think that they were going to end up together.
Yeah,
but I didn't want them to end up together. I kind of wanted to be like, I'm not 100% into the situation, so I would much rather see it like. So I'd much rather see it like end melodramatically.
I really like their love story more than I will be very honest. I like their love story a lot more than I like Emil and Nelly's.
You like Cable and Liat.
I do. I think it's very like young lovers. It reminds me a lot of the one in King and I.
I think just the setup is a little too sus. Like I didn't.
Oh, no, it's not. It's not. I did. No way. I'm saying it's like I'm advocating for like people to sell their children.
Adam literally X'd out in front of him just to give a visual underscore of how much he doesn't support.
Adam physically was like, Adam here.
Hi, just stepping out of the bit a little bit here.
No, I think like to me, because I could see that, but I didn't connect the young lovers trope completely because I was so bumped out about the like, and this is my daughter, and this is like that was too much for me. That I was like, if he had like seen her like in the island, like who's that beauty or whatever, I could have kind of been more like, oh yeah, it's like a natural progression of like we did see. So
you didn't like how Bloody Mary set it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. What can I go back to me? Christ on the cross.
I just said Adam. I literally passed it over to you.
What I like about the Cable Liat story is that is the story that feels like thousands of men probably have had while on deployment
or imagined like that was,
or imagined
like the
and
fantasy.
I think for a lot of men, like it really may have come down to the idea, like maybe they really did fall in love, have a young love with a woman, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm sure for a lot of men, there was the like, but I could never bring her home because my family won't accept her. My community won't accept it. Like, blah, 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 blah. I like that aspect of it because I'm sure more than the Nelly Emil situation, which is so niche. You know how often nurses met those like French colonial plantation owners and felt okay. Like I like that aspect of the show. It kind of reminds me a little bit about like, because there are stories of like queer or like gay men or men in like Asia, like China, Japan, even in the Philippines to some extent when they go to America or like the West and they like have boyfriends or whatever. But then it's always like, but knowing when I go back to my country, like I have to marry a woman and like still it's that same kind of thing that you're
interesting
trying to
comparison.
Tackle. But you may speak now, Adam. Because this is your story as
we'll
a white man.
We'll give the white man permission to speak.
He's felt seen. The only thing I will say is I appreciate the song You've Got to Be Carefully Taught, because technically we have not moved on from that song. But I would say that I wish, and I understand that in the book, Nelly's character's from Little Rock, blah, blah, blah. It just does the thing again that I really am so tired of, where it like, he's from Philly, so he like kind of gets race a little bit more than she does. Like it's the South is always characterized as the one who like really is like, oh, they just don't get it at all. Like he's quicker on the uptake, so he gets to sing the song about like, you've got to be taught to hate people. But
that's interesting. I mean, I didn't think about that, but I actually was going to say, I feel like him being from Philly has this whole, there's an expectation about how my life is going to be that I feel like is not there for Nelly's character. So there is actually, I think, some subtlety to the idea of like Northern racism that exists in it, because so when he talks about his fiance, he has this whole thing like, well, yeah, I got this like,
that's right, I remembered,
girl. Oh shoot, I forgot that I have a fiance.
Well,
that's
he does say in the song about her, which is called My Girl Back Home. He does not say he loves her. He does say he likes her a lot. So not. Oh,
I know that he doesn't love this woman. That I didn't need him to.
I think it was very clear when.
So his whole deal in this relationship is that he has this girl back home that he is engaged to, and he's supposed to go back and he's supposed to be with her. And that's wrapped up in the idea that he continues on his family business, and that it's very clearly about an expectation about how his life would unfold. And the unsaid part of the song is like, Riat cannot slot into that life. If I brought her home, it would mean losing the status that I have been afforded through the engagement that I actually have back home. Never a mention of what it might be like for her to have to go back to the United States. That's just not a concern, unfortunately. But that's really like what Cable's plot line is about. Yeah, I think that one, Cable is a fuckboy, and I'm not interested in him. Redeem. Yeah. The fact that he just forgot that he had a fiance, that he so quickly falls in love with Leah. I mean, he's not a person of substance. And that is disappointing to me, because Adam is struggling with the fact that I use that term. The fact that he starts the musical, especially because of how they set it up in the movie, where we start with the plane scene, and we see him as like, he is the serious guy in this operation that is kind of lost itself. Like, there's a dude who's like not wearing a shirt who like comes back into the plane and is like, hey, new guy, the captain wants you to go sit up with him. And the captain has like a little like corn cob cigar and like a jaunty hat. Like, everybody is not taking their job seriously. And Cable is like full uniform, very serious. Yeah. He then, when he gets to the beach, he's like telling the men like, hey, the captain told you to move this boat, go do it. And so at first you're like, here's this serious man to do this like mission. And he like really cares about stuff. And then everything to do with his relationship with women does not reflect any sort of like sense of moral character when it comes to having relationships. So that, very disappointing to me, especially such an attractive young man, you know?
I know.
Very attractive.
I know.
I think, RJ, that it's interesting that your big issue with it is the fact that it's like constructed that he meets her. So Bloody Mary, who I feel like we've talked about, but not really like fully laid out, because I didn't include her in my summary. She is this very enterprise. She's a very Mother Courage type figure. I'm sure that's more accessible to our listeners.
Absolutely. Now they get it.
How on earth is Mother Courage more accessible?
It was a joke, Adam. That was me.
Molly stepping out.
Reference. This is Molly stepping out. Sometimes I make references to very niche parts of theater that I think that the listeners might appreciate. And Adam sometimes misses things that I'm saying. So I just want to let the listeners in on kind of the dynamics of what just happened in that exchange. So anyway, stepping back into the pod. So Bloody Mary like trades with the guys on the island. She is this figure of kind of cultural translating for them, that kind of thing. And we actually start with this song, Bloody Mary is the girl that I love, that is very clearly meant to make fun of her as being this like older and not attractive woman. The joke of the song is that you wouldn't be in love with Bloody Mary.
Yes, because they're like, what a shame.
It's the Ruth song from Pirates of Penzance all over again.
It is absolutely the Ruth song. she kind of comes onto cable. And so you think that the joke is going to be that she likes this cute guy and is not appropriate. But it turns out that she's trying to get him interested in going to Bali High, because she also sings the song about Bali High that sets it up as like, oh, it's this place you really want to go to. So he does. And then it turns out that Liat is her daughter and that she was trying to kind of like get him interested in Liat and get her married off to him. What I think is, I have two issues with it. One is there is a sense I feel in the music also of like foreboding that happens with Bali High, especially as he's like leaving after he first meets Liat and falls in love with her, that this sense of like, he got tricked. He got taken in. And I think that is really insidious and gross. This idea of like going to the Orient and being overtaken and being tricked, and like they're gonna this mysterious other is gonna get you, kind of also a feeling, like right?
With the like Technicolor filter and like the like the haze, what is that called?
Imperceptibility of the actors with the Technicolor filter.
What is what's the
vignette?
The vignette too. Yes. It just has like an opium den kind of energy of like
very
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Very unreal space that this all happens in. But then RJ, even if we didn't have that plot, can you tell us one more time the title of that song that he sings about Liat? What is the title of it?
Oh, Younger Than Springtime.
Yeah, and throughout the musical, how do they refer to her?
Little girl.
Yeah, little girl.
Yeah, that's so, even in Nelly, it was like, Nelly was like, oh, that's right. You told me about your little girl. I was like, oh.
Yeah. His whole song to her is like, I want to be so clear. The thing I like about you is that you are so young. You're a very, very young girl. That's just like the whole deal. Like,
and let me tell you the ways of how young you are.
Yeah, let me give you some examples. I want to throw in some metaphors about youthfulness is where I'm feeling right now. He sees this woman within 30 seconds, they're making out with each other. And I'm saying woman because it makes me feel more comfortable. He sees a girl within 30 seconds, he's making out with her. And the thing he loves about her is how young he is. There's a part in the song where he starts to say like, this, and the thing about you being young, he says like, what I love about how young you are is that it makes me feel young, which also he's supposed to be young. Like it's not like he's an older character either. So that's weird that he already needs her to return him to like, I don't know. He's like 19 and he's like, oh, you make me feel 16 again. Like, I don't know. I don't know what's happening with that. But I thought that he was going to say
that's so interesting. There's another Rodgers and Hammerstein.
16 going on 17.
16.
Yeah. To be 16 again, I guess that was somebody's peak year or something. I don't know. And okay, I thought that at one point in the song, it was going to turn into like, and then when you're not young, here's what I'll love about you. Because I was like, surely we're going to get to something that's about her, that's an element of her life and personhood that will maintain when she ages. But no.
But that's, no interest in that. I love that you think that a 20-year-old white man would ever think about anything past living in the moment. That's lovely that you have that idea. I think that's why young men go to war, is because they don't realize that like the future is a concept that actually does exist.
Yeah. Which is another reason that I'm very glad he doesn't end up with her, because there is no sense that he has thought about the idea that marriage
they can't talk to each
involves, other. Yes. So that would be number 3. But I just want to finish off the thought that marriage involves being with somebody past when they're young. That's a pretty important element of it.
Yeah.
But yes, the third thing would be that she can't speak a same language. They both say they can speak a little bit of French. So like there's some level, but there's a whole song of her mom telling him about how great their life is going to be with the two of them just living there.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, well, stop talking.
Yes.
We're going to listen to Younger Than Springtime.
Okay.
And then we're going to listen to a little bit of Happy Talk.
Okay.
And then RJ is going to talk to us about Happy Talk.
Okay.
Younger than springtime are you, softer than starlight are you, warmer than winds of June are the gentle lips you gave me. Gayer than laughter are you, sweeter than music are you, angel and lover, heaven and earth are you to me. And when you're
Golly, baby, I'm a lucky cuss. Talk about the girl saying to the boy, you and me is lucky to be happy, talking, happy thoughts. Talk about things you like to do. You got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how you gonna have a dream come true? If you don't talk happy and you never have a dream, then you'll never have a dream come true.
Talk about the night. Let's talk about the moon, something in the stars.
Talk about the moon.
There is happy talk.
Sitting in the sky, looking like a lily on a lake.
It was so fascinating to watch because it on paper or like face value, it's like, look, like it's them planning out their beautiful life.
Mhm.
But I couldn't help but think like, okay, what is her MO? Is it because she wants Liat out of here? She's like, let's give her a bright future. Let's take her to Philadelphia or whatever.
That's the typical storyline.
I think it's a typical storyline. But then in the movie, she says, I've made so much money off of the war. And if the war keeps going, then at the rate it's going right now, Mama, we're making bank. Okay. So you can live here and you don't even have to work. I can take care of you and Liat. And then she says, because I can have beautiful mixed babies. And it just made me think about like, it just made me fully question about like, what is the true motive? Like, is it still continuing this like quote unquote exoticism, but then from the other aspects, like it's from her being like, well, I want to show that I have like European white babies too.
And that based on the reception they get in Bali High would perhaps give her better social status if she had mixed grandbabies.
Maybe. Yeah. So I was like, okay, so then is she like girl bossing? Like she's trying to like find a way to like be like empress of this island nation. So I was confused because when he says no, like he's like, I can't marry her. Like she kind of takes it out on Liat of like, almost like it didn't work. Like she throws the watch. It's like, blah, blah, blah. And then like, doesn't really get mad at him.
But what does she do? Who does she then promise Liat to?
A French
colonizer,
I guess.
Another French plantation.
Yeah.
So first of all, I'd like to say that I actually really like the character Bloody Mary, because in breaking from their typical like older lady is the moral compass. Like I like how complicated she is as a character and that she's not really clear.
And I do like the idea that she's, well, I guess this is more in line of all of the other matron characters of Virgin Harrison, but she's like a businesswoman. Like she's like, she has like clout over whatever dominion that she has over. And for here, it's interesting that she has it for both the island community and then also like the GI, like the Navy. Like she has a presence and clout that they still kind of look towards her or at least like respect her enough, you know.
She reminds me of the guy in, what is his name? Allie in Oklahoma, the like traveling salesman, where it's like a very opportunistic character.
The one who gives them like the tap number basically in the train station.
No. That's the one who like comes into town and is like selling like the peddler who's like selling the scents.
Oh, okay.
That 808 falls in love with.
Like Persian or whatever.
Oh, yes. 808. Okay.
I like her for that reason because I think it's kind of interesting, but also I think her whole thing is just like, they specifically write the line for her to wish that the war goes on longer so that she makes more money. Like, I think it's very pointed that she doesn't necessarily have the best interest of her daughter in mind. But
there is no love between these two characters.
And that's why. And that's why.
But in terms of like our last movie, right?
Doremi.
Oh, 2 movies ago, we talked about Gypsy and how like at the end of the day, there does seem to like actually be like care and love that that Mama Rose has for her daughters.
Yeah.
You do not feel that with Bloody Mary and Liat, but it's still like Bloody Mary is like a comic figure in the musical. Like she's still like played for laughs generally. I think it's just really interesting that I mean, you can debate whether or not they thread the needle with that, but I think it's impressive that they even tried to like kind of have
give nuance in that one.
Yeah. That's all.
It just made me feel confused, which I think is the point.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe you should think that she is saying that they're going to live there, but her goal would be eventually for him to take her back to Philadelphia. Or if we understand that all these French guys are colonizing these islands, if she just thinks like the future is going to be that's going to
be me up there at the top of the hill.
Yeah. So like the best thing I can do is get my grandbabies into the colonizer class instead of the colonized. Yeah.
My overall take with, I think, South Pacific generally is that I think it really does fit in I mean, like Rodgers and Hammerstein stereotypically has this very like, oh, everything's so clean and it wraps up with a pretty little bow at the end of each musical, but they really do tackle complicated issues, and most of their musicals don't end neatly. Like they really have like rough edges to them.
Yeah.
And I think this does fit into that conversation with that canon as well. But I think because it is specifically like about racism, I think I'll speak for myself. I think I wish this like was more neat in the way that it ended so that I could feel better about being like, oh, I like did enjoy it in certain aspects, but it's not perfect. But I also think that it not being perfect is why you can tell it's a Rodgers and Hammerstein because it's not neat. It's a little messy.
Yeah.
I will agree with the thing you said earlier about liking Cable and Liat more, to the extent that I wish almost that they were the central couple and that the Rodgers and Hammerstein chose to actually address how would that end other than killing Cable off. I wish that they had like really
they resolved something.
Made a decision. Yeah.
But then I also wonder like, because then it would be like, what I would love to see, like I wish you could see Liat's reaction to finding out that Cable had died. Like I wish that was a part of the show. Then I also you see like the hug. She says, "Oh, honey," and then like she hugs her.
Oh, like we got to see her process it verbally.
Yeah. Something, anything.
Yeah.
Anything more than that. But then that would have to be two women talking to each other about something other than a man.
It would be
God
a man.
forbid.
It would be about the man dying.
It would be a dead man, but it would be a still man.
Safe and the Bechtel. Yeah.
Oh God. But then I also am like, I don't know. Then we run into the thing of like with King and I, where it's like, well, then you're writing like from a perspective that you literally, I mean, you don't know these fucking people at all. Like these are just like stock tropes.
At least they made them one dimensional if they weren't going to have any sense of what these people
right.
Actually, their
it's like pros and cons to everything. It's
I really would have liked, for me at least, even if there was one scene where they processed that, like, or even complete a little bit more that storyline, to show a little bit more why Bloody Mary was insistent on it. Like, I just, like, it would have been cool to like, even just like what we said, like in her version of like, because the white men are up there and we're here. Something like that, like just shows like why she went through all this trouble.
What I'm hearing is let's produce a sequel to South Pacific from Liat's perspective.
And it's called North Atlantic. Stupid.
Boo.
But it would be interesting to like have it's like all of the French and the local language being spoken that we don't hear like outside.
Yeah.
Well,
Very Rosencrantz.
There was a 1998 ABC made for television version of South Pacific starring Glenn Close as Nellie Forbush, which is insane because Nellie should definitely not be that old.
But what year was it?
98.
Yeah.
How old was Glenn Close in 98?
Probably in her 30s.
30s, like 35.
1947, this says. Is that true?
Wow. So she's 50. Okay. Yeah, she's definitely way too old to be playing Nellie. But they try to solve some of the like.
That's funny. Why don't we just think of Nellie as like a older, more rough and toughy? Maybe not rough and tough.
Because Liat is like 12 years old, I'm pretty sure. So that's why we think of her as the older woman in the musical. She's probably not 12, but Liat is definitely a teenager, right? Like
she's probably 16, 15, 16.
Yeah. And so Nellie is old enough to have enlisted in the war. So she's probably at least of age.
She's an officer. She is, I think, probably 20.
I think just the officer title, and she's a Navy nurse, just in my mind is like, okay, that immediately makes her probably tougher.
Yeah.
But like even in the movie, when I watch her play it out, she's like, oh, she's like simple. Like she's like farmer's daughter almost a little bit. Like
she's supposed to be like very small town, like ideals.
Yeah. I think also though, I mean,
Little Rock isn't a major city in Arkansas, but
yeah. You did say like one of the reasons we forgive her for her prejudices is that she's clearly supposed to be young, and we can tell that from the song Cockeyed Optimist. I think that that's true to some extent, but I also feel like part of that song is saying, I'm a little too old to still be so naive, but I've chosen to hang on to it. So I guess I kind of see her as more like, like early 20s or something, because she's kind of saying like, hey, people wouldn't make fun of her for being so naive if she weren't a little too old to be so naive. So I think she is meant to be a little bit older. I do want to say though, okay, we're going to get to the murder in just a second, but I want to say in Analyzing Nelly, she has a whole song where she's like, I'm gonna wash this man right out of my hair. Famously, that's what it's about. She's like, I'm done with him. We're over. This is it.
She revolutionized the shampoo industry. Like
she made shampoo. It was amazing. And then she has one conversation with him, the contents of which, as I said, we'll get to in a minute. And then she's like, do you know what though? Oh, I just love him. I just love him so much. He's so great. And I love him. And then everyone's like, hey, Nelly, is that the guy you were going to wash out of your hair? Ha 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 ha. And she's like, they're laughing at me for being in love, but they shouldn't. And I was like, girl, I don't think that's why they're laughing at you. I think you're wrong about what it is that people are criticizing you for. They're laughing because you truly seconds ago said that you weren't going to see him anymore. Yeah. I think that's why they're laughing. And you know what? I don't think that they're wrong. I don't think they're wrong to laugh at you for it.
There is a sense of like, you know what? It's kind of giving me like Women Today of like, or maybe not Women Today.
Yes, tell us about Women Today, RJ.
I'd love to hear it. What are your thoughts about Women Today?
It's not me this time, it's RJ. Adam did say in the movie, she was like, it is kind of giving like white feminism today of like, just like her.
Oh, the scene when she like is like being confronted that she's racist, and so she like runs away crying, and she's like, I can't.
I'm sorry, and runs.
Girl,
it gives a little bit like forming my own narratives in my mind. So it's like, well, he said the one thing that I was technically like whatever. So it's like he's absolved. Blah 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 blah. Like fully created a narrative that I am in love with him now. So,
but she even like she is a character who also like she talks about, she's very aware that her mother has prejudice, right? She like calls it out specifically in the film, but then she even is like, she has the line about being like, oh no, my mom like thinks it's actually great. Like she still will like, she's clearly listening to her mom, because she says the whole thing about being like, my mom thinks older guys are better for girls than younger men. Yeah. And like, that's what she's doing. She's going along with that idea. I think that's very interesting too, in telling of the character.
You can sense that like when she was reading that letter, or like she was talking about her mom or whatever, that she was trying to tackle, like, she's probably heard her mom being like, I took it as like, she probably knows people that are white, that are like,
I bet she does know people that are white,
that are dating.
That's probably true. Yeah.
That are dating or like seeing like black men. That's kind of what I interpreted it as. And that's probably what was prescient at the time for her and her family.
So the stuff about the mom though comes before she knows that he had another wife.
Yeah.
So I don't think that the mom's objections have to do with race. I think that the mom is saying, and you know what? I have some sympathy for the mom. I mean, obviously she had some other prejudiced ideas that I don't agree with, but like what I imagine happened is her, let's say 20-year-old daughter said, hey, I went across the world to become a war nurse. And I met this older guy from France who owns a plantation here. And I'm thinking about just marrying him and staying here. And that's a little bit freaky, probably, if you're her mom. And you probably write back and you say, let's maybe slow down with the marrying this guy stuff. Let's think about, do you have enough in common?
You are absolutely misreading this, and I love this energy.
Okay. What is your interpretation?
It is not textual, so I will grant you that. But I do think,
so maybe I'm not misreading it. Great, cool.
But I think the idea that it's written with, the idea that the show is written with, you've got to be carefully taught, specifically by your relatives, about racism. I think you're supposed to infer from that her mother is racist. I don't think it's like out of the realm of possibility.
That's what I was saying about her mom has other prejudices that I don't agree with. I'm just saying that at the beginning, when she says, my mom has reservations about this and she's prejudiced against anyone outside of Little Rock, that's not explicitly about race because he's white. I'm saying that while I don't agree with, obviously her mother taught her some racist ideas, which we find out later.
Yeah.
That the initial reason her mom has objections to Emil, I think might be not just grounded in prejudice.
Yeah, it's more about like I met a rich Frenchman.
It would be xenophobia because her objection would not be that he's rich, and it's obviously not that he's old because she says that's fine. It's that he's French.
It's that he's French. Yeah, and maybe it's a combination of xenophobia against Emil as a French person, and then just like the culture of the place where Nellie is. I'm guessing that what freaks her mom out about it is like that she would stay.
That she would stay,
place that
and
to
it
her
becomes
mom is
her new world.
Not a place that you would want to live. So I guess, yes, in that way we could say maybe it's grounded in xenophobia in a couple different ways.
Yeah.
But I do think Nellie should ask more questions. So let's get into the murder because Nellie does need to ask more questions. The first scene we get of Nellie and Emil, they've already met. They're already starting to fall in love with each other. He in the scene is like, hey, I just want you to know I do live here because I murdered a guy in France. And she's like, do you know what? I get your vibe and it's fine.
I love that. I love that for you. Oh my God. I love that.
And then some military officers pull her in and they're like, can you tell us more about this guy? Like, is he suspicious? And she's like, I mean, he seems fine. He did murder somebody, but that's fine. And they're like, okay, well, could you learn some more stuff about him? She's like, sure. And then she goes, you know what? I actually know very little about that guy and I should learn more.
I thought that was so funny where she like turns around the door and like, I guess I don't know him.
Yeah.
Like as if it's like she just realized that like the world, like truly her whole world changed. And I thought it was so funny.
And then not only that, so one of the things they ask her in the scene with the officers is what are his political beliefs? And she's like, I actually don't know.
I don't know.
When he comes to talk to her after she's decided maybe I shouldn't be with him because he's like older and I don't know that much about him, blah, blah, blah. Or I guess she doesn't care about the older stuff. I don't know. Cable kind of cares and she kind of agrees with him. Anyway, she then in the scene where she talks to him again, the first thing she asks is about the political beliefs. And look, let me be clear. You should know the political beliefs of your partner before you consider marrying them.
I completely disagree. I completely disagree.
Shut up. You should ask about that. But it's not till later in the conversation where he again references the murder where she goes, oh yeah, I should also ask you some questions about that. And I was like, girl, how is that not the first thing when you saw him again where you said, I actually do need more information about the murder? And the story that he tells her is, there was this guy in my village. He was a bully. He was a jerk. Everybody hated him. And then one day I gathered everybody together and I was like, let's go get that guy. And they were like, no, we're too afraid. And then it turns out he was behind me. So awkward. We got into a fist fight and I killed him accidentally. The fact that you would not say, I need one other source of information about this, just to make sure that the story you're telling me, and I get it, it's the 40s and we're on an island in Polynesia. It would be hard to get other information, right?
Sure.
I sympathize. You can't just Google crime reports from,
especially like 15 years ago too, because she was like, this all happened.
It would be difficult, but you should not believe his version of events. I'm sorry. Before you commit to him, you need to find a way to get one other person's perspective.
Yeah. Before you commit to this man, you need to figure out why he committed murder. Honey.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly. And that's something I will take a hard stance on. Before you marry someone who murdered somebody else, get at least one other source of information on it.
Yeah.
I feel like the only reason the murder is in there is to explain why there is a French man living on this island in the South Pacific.
They
really needed
because it is the most minor.
But it's
actually not even a tension point in the film. It's a curiosity. It's something interesting about him.
Yeah.
But it's not, it doesn't cause her like, oh, I should really rethink this. Like, it's not that. And it's not a reason that they think he shouldn't do the mission.
But that's the thing. The whole payoff is that like, we need to know why he murdered someone. And then it ends up being like, well, we know he murdered someone. So he would be a great fit for this mission.
He's
okay with killing.
Because he could kill.
Yeah.
That was a really interesting moment of portrayal of the military, I thought.
Well,
Yeah.
Is anyone shocked? No.
Yeah, that would be a great source of information, Nellie. You're an officer of the military. You could ask them maybe to find you a little bit more information about it, because it seems like they did their own research and found out about it. They could have told her something about it, I'm guessing.
I just am more curious why it's included in the book in any way, because it has no effect on the story.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's something that's in the source material and that they just kind of like, it just like
had to
stayed in and nobody asked the right question of saying like, wait, do we even need this part of it anymore now that we've simplified and cut down and stuff like that?
They knew that we were going to be critical of when they wrote out in Phantom of the Opera, when they wrote out the
something.
He was in Arab.
It was the Persian
or something. Persians. Yeah.
And so they were like,
huge for the culture, Persians.
I was referencing because we talked about the Persian peddler.
Yes. Earlier. No, I know.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that. I don't know why they couldn't just say like he saw economic opportunity in
because he's a French.
We're in French Polynesia, girl.
Right.
Like, it's owned by the French. I don't.
Maybe also that they felt like it's important that it ends, and we specifically understand that Nellie and Emil are going to stay there, and so they needed to give him a reason that he's like isn't going to eventually go back to France.
Leaving. Yeah, but having
kids would also
having kids in an estate. It's literally having a giant estate on this island.
Yeah, but you know that there's
it actually would be a cleaner way to introduce the kids, because she could be like, "When are you planning on going back to France?" And he's like, "Never, because my children live here." And then she'd be like, "What? In come Hansel and Gretel."
Yeah. That's a good point. We know there's no family law though that would keep him on that island because of the fact that he has these children. There's never a
family
mention
law,
of
period.
Yeah, maybe his ex-wife or deceased wife has relatives who want to see their niece and nephew, grandchildren, anything like that. No.
But let me just make it clear though that like when the lieutenant was like, well, now that you know Nellie doesn't want to marry you, you have no reason to live anymore. So what's to lose? Let's do this mission.
Oh yeah, no one else relying on you or that you love or anything like that. Totally. So
let's do it. Let's go on this crazy mission.
I'm gonna play a little bit of Some Enchanted Evening because it is an actual fucking bop.
Oh, a banger.
Some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger. You may see a stranger across a crowded room, and somehow you know even then that somewhere you'll see her again and again. Some enchanted evening, someone may be laughing. You may hear her laughing across a
but other than that, I think that's pretty much it. Do we like the show within a show, the little Thanksgiving performance?
I will say Folly's number.
Folly's number.
Huge for Showgays canon. Yeah.
The pumpkin
contender?
outfit.
It's definitely the weakest Follies.
Yeah.
But it, I like the scrappiness of it.
But that's the theme of the Follies, right? It's that like, this is what we've created with our resource. It's giving Dragon a dime, like.
Oh, well. You want to talk about Dragon?
I like Nellie in the sailor outfit. I think that's cute.
So
I think the drag that the other guy does is not so fabulous.
But do you not think men in dresses are funny?
Because inherently funny.
Because that is.
You know what?
It's so hilarious.
I don't know about it. I haven't really fully taken a stance on drag, so I'm just not sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We didn't just watch this Priscilla Queen of the Desert or anything.
I didn't. We didn't express any opinions there.
No.
Mm-mm.
I think it is I'm going to wrap up my main points of the film. I don't think it's a great movie. Probably specifically because of the color.
Yeah, we didn't see it in the highest quality, to be fair. Yeah.
Right. We also didn't see it in the highest quality, but I don't think it's like a great movie. But I also I'm trying to decide if it's like if it's like a carousel situation where it's like, should we do it anymore?
Yeah.
It's tough. I don't think it's as cut and dry as Carousel. I think Carousel is it's pretty much like you should not do Carousel. Yeah. Maybe just like songs in concert, and that's pretty much the only way you can do it.
Did we have that same feeling for King and I too? I'm trying to remember. Were we like, should we stop doing King and I?
Yeah,
we definitely
that's
asked the
takeaway.
question, but I don't know that we came to like a real conclusion.
I don't think me and Molly as white people though can be like, well, we decided we shouldn't do King and I.
Yeah. RJ, you can decide though for everyone.
You can decide though.
Like.
Yeah. You can decide.
I'll let the pod know in the future episode.
Okay.
You think on that.
What decision you go down? With this one, it's hard because I do think there is value. I mean, like we just talked about this with Barbie, where like people were upset that Barbie didn't have like the most nuanced take of like feminism, but also like, and obviously this doesn't have the most nuanced take of racism, but I also think that there's still fucking people who need to hear it. Like, I don't think I don't think just because a lot of people have moved on from 101 doesn't mean that Psych 101 should stop existing. Like, I think it still needs to be.
I think there's also value in revisiting stuff about early attempts to fight racism too. Like, I think people talk a lot about like, well, we can't erase racist things because we have to know that history exists. And I think that part of that needs to also be that we include things that were very first attempts at addressing things like racism in musicals, I think is really important. Yeah. I think that we've also had several moments on the pod where we talked about like problematic elements where we proposed like a line that would help change things a little bit. And so what I think South Pacific, of all of the examples we've talked about, maybe has the most potential for, if we got some permission from the estate to make some adjustments, it could be fixable potentially. And so I think that if you are a musical theater writer who's listening to this, you should write a letter before you die that gives permission for people to make some adjustments to the things that you make to reflect modern times, because there's a lot of like, do not change the words that exist in copyright law. And there are in some ways, good reasons for that. But I think about what Rodgers and Hammerstein were trying to accomplish with this. And I think it's a shame that the way that copyright law exists now means that we like really can't make it reflect what I would guess would be Rodgers and Hammerstein's perspectives if they existed now. And again, like we would maintain, like, of course you should keep the original version in some, but also like preserve archivally what the original text is. But I don't think that because theater brings text to life, I am not of the opinion that text then that the baseline text should never change, because it changes every time you do it, because you're performing it in a new context and with new people and all that stuff. And I think that we should construct a version of copyright and canon that allows the text itself to change a little bit with the time too. And that's the best way to make sure that things can continue to be sort of like ethically produced, would be my take on it.
I think it's a great take.
Thank you.
I think that's a great take too. I think like in doing a production, I would want to like, I understand the weirdness about the Bali High being like, Stonehenge, but also like, I do think that also is a lot of people's experience when they travel for the first time at like 19, 20 years old, is that like, it is exotic. And like, I don't think we should celebrate exoticism, but I do think the excitement of experiencing somewhere else for the first time does leave you with that feeling to some extent.
A wistful, magic, fantastical. Almost.
Yeah. Just like
it's so otherworldly.
Right.
Worldview.
Yeah.
And I think again, if there were a moment later where somebody reflects a little bit more critically about that being Cable's, if we made it more clearly, like this is Cable's perspective, and then maybe it comes out of it a little bit, I think that could do a lot for that number.
Yeah. I also think maybe you shouldn't like welcome them to Bali High, but being like, oh, thank God the whites are here now.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a little wild. But
there was also so much happening at that celebration that I was like, I'm sure these are it's a mashup of a bunch of things in different cultures that are like all being thrown together. And then there are probably things that would never happen at the same time too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's probably like a wedding dance happening at the same time as like a funeral procession.
A ceremonial burying.
Just every single thing every holiday is happening on the same day.
Right.
Critiques. Okay, so I could not find, technically this has on Rotten Tomatoes. This has let me click it real quick. It has an 82% on Rotten Tomatoes.
No one has any criticisms.
There are 11 reviews.
Okay.
But the reviews are like just random blogs, which is it's tough. I don't really want to. I'd rather pull from like critics and periodicals.
Yeah.
So I have no quotes. And
we
even
get criticism on this podcast.
Even the Wikipedia page didn't even have criticism, which I was very shocked by, because usually there's a criticism section, but not in this Wikipedia page. So that's where we stand on that. However, Letterboxd came in clutch.
Mhm.
This is a 3.1 on Letterboxd, 3.1 stars. And here are some of the there we go. Here are some of the quotes I pulled. Jackson gave it 3 stars and said, "Racism in my 50s musical, it's more likely than you'd think." Holly gave it 2 stars and said, "The guys singing 'There Ain't Nothing Like a Dame' were hilarious because not one of them looked straight."
Oh my God, we forgot to talk about that song at all. We have to go back to it.
We have to go back.
Letterboxd,
And then Ben gave it 1.5 stars and said, "This felt like a parody of a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical."
Oh,
so there you go.
Yeah. Okay. How does There's Nothing Like a Dame manage to be such a gay song when it is about men desiring women? How does it do it?
One of the things I like about what it's depicting about war is the idle, and Forrest Gump does this a little too, but it's the idleness of like waiting around for war to happen. Especially in the musical, like it does this in the movie too, but it does it more specifically in the musical where like the whole show is just like, they're just like sitting around on a beach waiting for war to happen. And then at the end, after the mission is when they like go off to go fight the Japanese from the intel that they found out during the mission. But I like that aspect. But what I think about is interesting with There Is Nothing Like a Dame. I was reading in the original Broadway production that the staging was just that it was just the men and they just pace back and forth the whole song. That's the whole staging is just like they're cooped up animals that are stuck in a cage and like can't get out. And like, even though they have all these things that they get to do, from like games and stuff, and they're on a beach and they talk about like they can eat fresh picked mangoes or whatever. Like there's nothing quite like the folds of a labia. You know what I mean? And I really think that's really beautiful when you put it like.
Stop. Absolutely stop. I think maybe I think it's that sailors are just inherently gay. And that's just a thing we've established in culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very nautical and it's a lot of men all together.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels very gay. And then I think maybe it's the thing is like they're comparing things that are like also nice, but it's not quite having a woman. And it feels like maybe the underlying thing is like, do you know what also could like be kind of like having a woman, but not quite? It would be hooking up with these other sailors.
Yeah,
here.
hooking up with
I
a
think
man.
maybe that's also like part of what feels very gay about the song is it feels like something you would say to justify, like, it wasn't that I was actually attracted to someone of the same sex. It's just that there were no other options. So it's not quite having a dame, but like, it's, nothing's quite like that, but it sure is close. I think is probably what feels gay about the song.
The lyrics also do somehow make it sounds like a gay man wrote it. Like, it's like, oh, definitely just like a bunch of straight guys would be like, I bet they call them dames. And I'm trying to think of
this
things
is what I think locker room talk is like. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's very funny.
It's very much serving. Did you watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
A couple seasons, yeah.
Okay. Complicated things with the fact that it's about cops, but a very funny show. The captain on the show is gay, and there's a whole like part of a season where he and Jake go undercover, and so he goes undercover and pretends that he's straight. And Straight Holt is like a very funny. So like his thing is that he keeps talking about how he loves the heaviness of his wife's breasts. he doesn't quite get how to describe what men find attractive about women. And so that's kind of what I think about also in the song is just that like, that like Straight Holt trying to be like, they're voluptuous and just substantial. And so that's really what I love about my wife and her breasts. That's kind of the vibes of this song for sure.
That's funny.
Okay, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but my MVP is Billis.
Oh yeah, Luther Billis.
Luther Billis. Out of everyone, he felt the most like aware that I am in war. We are just doing our best to not like blow our brains out of like what the seriousness of what is actually at stake here. So he felt the most like, I'm just here to survive and have a good time and not take anything seriously, because all of the other characters were like, we're making life and death situations that have nothing to do with the war. Mm-hmm. So And I thought he was great. Like he had like a really interesting like camaraderie with everyone, especially with Bloody Mary, but then also like with Nelly, like having to like,
and with Cable, he like
Cable,
knows
like,
everyone,
understanding the politics of like the social politics, the social game of what it means to live in this camp.
Yeah, he's an interesting character because he gets to be the glue that binds the two different plot lines
together.
Yeah.
He's a festy.
Yes, I was about to say festy, like jester kind of character that just gets to play the puck.
Yeah.
Okay, so for MVP, it's actually tough because I really like Mitzi Gaynor's performance as Nellie.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll go with John Kerr as Joseph Cable. First of all, I think his voice is stunning. I think he's a wonderful voice. He's very handsome.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I like Cable as a character. I know he's complicated, but I think he's really good in this movie, actually.
Yeah. Well, I want to give a shout out to Juanita Hill, right? Or Hall. I can't remember which one. Juanita Hall.
Mm-hmm.
I think Bloody Mary is such a weird character, as we've talked about the tonal shifts that she has to do and everything. And I just think that Juanita brings this like sense of humanity and realness to this character that's not written to be a real person.
Yeah.
And I want to just shout out how admirable her performance is of just dealing with this very strange material. But I really actually want to give it to Nellie's little white shorts. I just love those little shorts.
They're so cute. I really like the costumes in this movie.
Oh my God. There's just the whole style of like the shorts and the tied up shirt. It's peak 50s. And I love it.
One of the most fascinating things I read about when they were doing the original Broadway production is they gave each of the guys who were playing the sailors, they gave each of them $50 and just told them to go down Broadway to one of the surplus military consignment shops and just to buy an outfit under $50, and that's what their character would wear for the musical.
Because they wanted it to be like authentic, mixed around?
Mixed around and like not super designed, but also like the idea of like World War II had just ended. So there were just like military consignment shops of like peacoats and like just because there was so much.
Yeah.
But now that it was over and everybody had left, like they have all this stuff they can sell. I was like, oh, that is so weird. That idea is so weird to me. Anyway.
I mean, yeah, military surplus stores still exist, but the idea of it being so
ubiquitous.
Yeah. And bountiful, like byproducts of war is definitely very foreign to us now in this time period.
For sure.
Okay.
I do want to say, I was going to say one thing about Juanita Hall is I agree with you completely that her performance on paper, that character is such a caricature.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do think she actually brings like a humanity to that performance that is not on the page at all. And it's very impressive because you would have to do a lot of searching and thought about like, it's good that they used the woman who played the original production because she had lived in that character for so long that she could find those nuances, where I don't think someone who had just gotten the script like 2 months before or whatever would be able to in the same refreshing way.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that even like when she pulls, God, what is that character name? Liat. When she pulls Liat away after Cable says he can't marry her, she calls him a stingy. She uses one of the like phrases she's picked up from the sailors. Stingy something. But I thought it was interesting that like it's used as, it's still supposed to be like kind of a joke that she's still, I don't know. It's funny, but it's like a dark funny that like even in this like moment of like very serious, like she's pulling the two lovers away.
Yeah.
She's still.
It's all like economic and it's all in reference to a culture she just kind of grasps in a very tenuous way.
She doesn't really understand what she's doing.
Yeah.
And that's used in like the way she talks. Like she really doesn't, she's not able to like fully grapple what she's dealing with, but it's really interesting.
Yeah. My closer, which I really struggled to write a good closer for this. I just didn't know what to reflect on. So I'm going with, what is an American war that you think is undermined for content for a musical?
This is hard. I would say World War II is not undermined for anything ever.
No.
So I'm going to not say that. For a musical, though, interesting. Maybe the Spanish-American War, because I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. My answer was also going to be something I know nothing about, which is the War of 1812, because all we know is that it was in 1812. And I know it was with the British. So it was a little bit of like a relitigation of the revolution, I think.
Revolutionary. Yeah.
And that is interesting.
And Dolly Madison ran out with the china from the White House while it was on fire. We all know that story.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I would like, basically after Hamilton, I expect the musical theater canon to do the heavy lifting of teaching me more about periods of American history that I have a very tenuous grasp on right now. I feel like that is the role and responsibility of musicals. And I would like it to, step up to the plate on some of these more obscure wars.
I made the joke, but I do think it's interesting that musicals specifically, not necessarily plays or theater as a whole, but musicals I don't think really grapple with war that often. And I think it's probably because it's harder to make it musical, because musicals are typically mostly comedies. So I think it's harder to do that generally. But there's not a lot of war musicals I can think of off the top of my head.
Well, okay. So there's certainly other things that have to do with the military. I'm thinking of like, what's the one that actually has the three sailors that go to New York? And that's like where do you know what I mean? There's like the bit of the three sailors who are like on leave in New York City. And it's a thing that gets referenced as like an icon more than the actual, is it 42nd Street maybe?
It's not American in Paris?
No,
42nd Street is about like actors auditioning for musicals.
On the Town.
On
three
the
sailors
town.
and a 24-hour shore leave in New York City.
Shore leave, Fleet Week.
Yes, I think that we have seen before, because I think that war is a time of like break from normal society and reality, and you go off to this other place and it's kind of like a very intense summer camp sort of situation. And musicals love to explore that sort of like outside of, and the same, we've talked about this before, Shakespeare in the Forest and musicals in water. We like that sort of like, let's set up a time where social expectations are subverted because it gives you more room to explore in a story.
Yeah.
I think we have Hamilton, Revolution. We have Assassins, obviously deals with war because it's talking about political assassination. So some of the time periods of that are in wartime.
Parade is not Civil War, but it's like, I think it's not Reformation. That is like
Restoration.
Restoration.
But it starts with a soldier coming back. The Old Red Tails of Home, which is, oh my gosh, such a beautiful song.
It's so good.
I think a soldier coming back from the Civil War. It would be the Civil War, I think, time period wise. Hold on. Let me double check that too.
Parade. Oh no, it's.
Oh no, yeah. Because it's
1913. Oh, the musical opens in Georgia at the time of the American Civil War.
Oh, okay. So we're not totally
and suddenly it is 1913. Okay,
so we are like reminded of the Civil War to begin. It's just like a little interlude in the Civil War. Okay. Yes.
The years pass and the young soldiers become an old-legged veteran who is preparing to march in the annual Confederate Memorial Day Parade.
Okay.
And that's the parade.
Yes, that is the parade. So I feel like musicals are like interested kind of around wars, but not in wars generally.
Miss Saigon is very famously about Vietnam.
Yeah.
It's hard. I feel like most musicals about war, most musicals in general, really don't have like an anti-hero narrative. Most musicals are very like, your protagonist is also like the good guy.
Yeah.
And your antagonist is the villain. And so I think a lot of the war, like, because of that, it's harder to do modern wars because they've been a lot more complicated and muddled in terms of like the politics surrounding them. So it would be very crazy to do like the war in Afghanistan as a musical.
Yeah.
First of all, the idea of even saying the war in Afghanistan in the musical is, I want to throw myself off the apartment building that I live on. But I think because Saigon only really gets away with it because it's not really it's set in the time of the war, but it really is just like an updating of Madama Butterfly more than anything else. So yeah, I feel like most musicals are really like, it's like World War II, or like there are like, I think there's a couple Civil War musicals, but it's almost always like the Americans or the Northerners are the good ones.
Yeah, I can't even think of a Civil War musical.
I think of yeah, I guess I was gonna say Parade, but that doesn't actually count as we just figured out. Or how like it's referenced in, or not it specifically, but like it's happening along the same time as The King and I, but how like that is using more like the narrative around Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Yeah. Interesting. Listeners, write in if you can think of a Civil War musical. And I think we're learning, as we said, in South Pacific, it's set in the war, but it's really not about war. And I think we're learning that it would be very hard to write a musical about war. Assassins might actually be the closest in that I feel like it directly deals with some of the political reasons behind wars and not just reflects Sondheim's writing, that he was able to get into that level of intellectualism in a way that really no other musical theater composer, I feel like, has been able to successfully do.
Yeah. I feel like I can think of more plays that are about war.
Yeah.
But I think plays it's easier to not break. Well, it's actually really easy to not break out in song when you're doing a play because it's a play, not a musical. I think that's a huge thing about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a
There's
great
war
take.
in Pippin. There's like, don't they go to war in Pippin? Isn't that like they go to do the
Charlemagne Crusades? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it shows up. It's just not the content. And I think it reflects that there just
it's almost
is like
never the plot.
Yeah. There is a tonal limitation to musicals due to the need to break out into song. And I think that there's been a lot of amazing exploration to the limits of that throughout time. But war, oh my God, Les Mis.
I was thinking of Les Mis, right?
Though.
But it's also a battle more than like
a battle.
Full war.
So that's probably the closest to like full on like applying the spectacle thing that a song can do to a armed conflict that we have, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think that it does, putting a battle into a song valorizes it. And so I agree, like it removes a lot of the nuance.
But it really does. It's very similar to Hamilton in that it is like, they're both about like one person's full life. And that is an episode in their life in which they have this battle moment.
Yeah, well, Les Mis is about a lot of people's lives. It's about Valjean, but there's a lot of characters in it. But yes, yeah, interesting. This is
and all the women love Valjean.
All the women love Valjean,
just like all the women love Alexander Hamilton.
Exactly. This is either going to be a conversation we play back that it's going to be really interesting, or it's going to be incredibly boring, and you're going to cut most of it. And I'm excited to find out which one.
Trying to think in real time about musicals. Isn't it crazy that neither of us, I'll cut this out, don't worry, but isn't it crazy that neither of us like musicals? Like we just do this for the grift. Isn't it crazy?
We've been successfully pretending to like musicals for such a long time. And I'm really impressed with that. Our commitment to the bit that we are people who like musicals, it's really unparalleled.
Sorry, Adam here stepping out of the bit. Molly and I obviously really like musicals. It's kind of the whole reason we're doing this show. This is Molly stepping
out of the bit. Adam is lying to you right now. We've never liked musicals. Never once have I enjoyed watching a musical.
It's a bit.
I didn't even watch any of these movies. I've just been doing Wikipedia summaries and just making wild guesses. And so far they've turned out okay.
Yeah, Spark Notes. Yeah. I will before we close, I would like to apologize for my lack of preparedness in terms of the history, because I did not have the time to both read and write the notes down. So
we did this on a Sunday, which is not our usual time slot, and everyone got a little thrown off.
I was so busy at church this morning.
It's the Sabbath, and we just are, limited in what we can do.
It's the Christian Sabbath, to be clear.
Really? Yeah, I wasn't aware that other religions had different Sabbaths. Thanks so much for that.
Well, isn't Jewish Sabbath on Friday and Saturday?
That's why I'm joking about it, Adam. I'm aware that
keep
Shabbat
missing the jokes. Mother Courage Sabbath. That's so niche.
So niche.
God, I wish RJ was here to really balance out this equation right now.
Going a little too off track. Oh, he would have shortened up that war conversation for us for sure.
Yeah, he really would have known anything about music. That's the one who doesn't know anything about music.
Oh, don't leave the podcast early.
Don't leave the podcast or else we're going to tear you apart. Okay. Well, let me end with a song, as always. You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. Bye. Thank you for listening to the best revival of a podcast, Showgays. You can find us on social media. Adam is at Adam Noecker on Twitter. RJ is at RJ Food Rocks on Instagram. And Molly is at Molly Matiny on Instagram. This episode was edited and mixed by Adam Noecker. This has been an Ampliverse production. You can find our show page and more information at theampliverse.com. If you'd like to send us your own takes on the movie we just watched, reach out to us via email and we might read it aloud on the show. Our email is showgaysmoviemusical@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to help others find the show. And now, as always, the show must go on, so stick around to hear what we're going to be watching next episode.
I kept my promise. Don't keep your
Discovering voices, building worlds. The Ampliverse.